The story begins with the birth of a young girl to a poor ice mage and a half-wolf woman. Her family barely scraped by, selling herbs she foraged in the snow. Poverty meant little to her family, but not to certain members of the wolf clan. While out gathering herbs again, she ran into some boys in the forest who saw her as nothing more than a thing. The pure-blooded wolves insulted her, treating her like dirt, calling her a filthy vegetarian, and looking at her with contempt. They told the half-breed to learn to answer when a wolf spoke to her. Their disdain for half-breeds was more cutting than the biting northern winds. And so, the girl began to truly believe that her very birth was a terrible mistake. Driven by his cruel, wolfish nature, the boy crushed all the herbs she had painstakingly gathered for her mother. He paid no mind to her horrified face, assuming the half-breed was simply trembling with fear. Like a trembling lamb, the girl scratched his face in self-defense. You might think she was insane for using ice magic, a mudblood daring to attack a pureblood. Fear forced the girl to summon her courage, threatening him with a shard of ice to back away. Her confidence only amused them, making them laugh. What good was weak ice magic in a place surrounded by ice? The cruel boy, thinking the girl was playing dumb because she was a half-breed, decided to teach her a lesson. He shoved her hard against a tree, and in that instant, a strange vision flashed through her mind. It was of a human girl, and she realized it was her from a past life. In that same moment, she remembered a novel she had once cherished. The protagonist, Little Red Riding Hood, leader of the half-dragons, met a half-wolf during the war against the wolf clan, and he asked for her help. Little Red Riding Hood fell for the man who pleaded with her to help resurrect his sister. The novel's heroine succumbed to temptation, despite his tainted wolf blood. She made him hers all the same. It was exactly the kind of story the girl had dreamed of reading. The author had impeccable taste, and Little Red Riding Hood didn't disappoint. You couldn't help but fall for the charming man's gaze as he slowly integrated into her life. Snapping out of her thoughts, the girl couldn't believe she had been reincarnated into that very novel, and in such a dire situation. She suddenly realized this was the world of Little Red Riding Hood. Thinking the author must be a complete madman, she bolted. The boys immediately gave chase to the frantic girl, but she didn't stop, wanting to see everything for herself. Meanwhile, her mother waited patiently for Eva to return. If the girl didn't come back, she and her youngest child would have no lunch. If Eva understood correctly, the novel's male lead was her yet-to-be-born brother, Zion. In the novel Little Red Riding Hood, the half-wolves and half-dragons were mortal enemies. In a world where humans and half-breeds coexisted, the conflict began when a wolf stole the heart of the dragon leader. Having lost the heart he intended for his lover, the leader died, unable to contain his rage. Legend had it that Little Red Riding Hood's brother also had only one heart and was fated to die from being unable to control his power. She blamed the wolf clan and began a purge in the north. In this novel, the heroine is the male lead's sister, and she was slaughtered like a dog by Little Red Riding Hood. The author must have been insane to give the girl such a tragic childhood, dooming her to a joyless future. She thought that she had to get out of here no matter what. She didn't want to die like a stray dog. A strange noise behind the house drew her mother's attention, and she went out to find a panicked Eva. The girl insisted that wolves had wrecked their house and threatened to kill them if they didn't leave. After much thought, she decided the two protagonists must not meet, so Eva had to leave home. She would keep her reincarnation a secret, which meant lying to her mother. She just wanted to protect everyone, but it seemed someone was laughing at her plans. After Zion was born, her mother's health worsened, and there were no wolves nearby willing to deliver a half-breed child. They say good deeds are rewarded, so her mother told Eve to be kind to others. That was the last time the girl heard her mother's voice, as fate snatched her away from her two children. This was her reality now. With both parents gone, Eve resolved to protect Zion at all costs. After years of living deep in the forest, Eve stumbled upon a shocking discovery. A little girl lying in the snow caught her by surprise. She couldn't figure out what a child was doing out here. The child was burning with fever, but our girl thought someone else would surely come along to help. Just then, her mother's words about good deeds being rewarded flashed through her mind. Whether it was pity for the girl left in the cold or her mother's words that moved her, Eve ended up taking her home. When she returned, little Zion greeted her at the door, overjoyed that his sister was back. The little guy had been playing here all alone, with no strangers visiting. The girl was still unconscious, sleeping like a log, perhaps just needing more rest. It had been 3 days since Eve brought the lost girl home, completely oblivious to the consequences. Thinking the fever was keeping the girl from waking, she asked her brother to fetch some cold water and a towel. Even the best herbs were of no use, and taking her to a hospital was difficult given their situation. Perhaps the half-breed had made the wrong choice, but leaving her there would have been just as dangerous. Eve gently touched the little girl's hand and apologized, having done all she could. Just then, she felt the girl's hand twitch slightly, followed by a faint moan. The girl shot up in a panic, asking what had happened. When the girl from the forest opened her eyes, the room was illuminated by her bright, ruby-like amber eyes. This terrified Eva, as she knew that in this world, only one race possessed red eyes. Pushing those strange thoughts aside, if she recalled correctly, things became much more complicated after his death. The one who took Zion was none other than Little Red Riding Hood herself. In the novel, Little Red Riding Hood asked Zion who she was to him, demanding he answer then and there. He replied, through his tears, that Little Red Riding Hood was his benefactor. But now, for some reason, Eva was hearing that answer from her. She was embarrassed, feeling that being called a benefactor was a bit over the top. If this girl was truly Little Red Riding Hood, there had to be a reason for her to appear in the north this early. In the original story, she and Zion didn't meet until they were adults. Sensing that things had changed, Eva immediately hid her brother behind her, telling him to stay out of sight and hoping they could talk later. Zion didn't understand why he couldn't see her. All the heroine could think was that if they met now, everything would end just like in the original story. She had to tell him the girl might be frightened and asked her brother to wait outside. The girl felt guilty, only now thanking her benefactor for saving her life. Eva felt it was only natural, and though she had been worried, it seemed the girl was all right. It was clear that if she and Zion didn't meet, the half-breed's plan could proceed. The plan to survive this crazy story was to buy a castle, but not a flashy one. The broker only helped wolves with confirmed identities across the border. Nobodies couldn't get in. Then again, with enough money, you can go anywhere. So Eve's grand goal was to buy a castle with Zion and move to the human world. This was also why she had memorized the herb book. It was a memento from her father, and she had been saving money by selling rare herbs from the forest. But Eve, fixated on her plan, was completely unaware that the story's events had already been thrown into chaos. If she could just get Little Red Riding Hood home safely, her happy ending would be just a matter of time. Suddenly, the girl decided to ask where she was, what this place was, and who Eve was. Hoping it didn't mean what she thought it meant, Eva began to grow visibly worried. Any belief she had that the author wouldn't do this vanished when Little Red Riding Hood said she couldn't remember anything. This author was a complete and utter madman. Just when did this kid get amnesia? It wasn't that she remembered nothing, only that she was hot. Something must have happened to Little Red Riding Hood before she passed out, but it was unclear if that was the cause of her memory loss. If the novel was anything to go by, she was Rachel, a half-dragon warrior who could control fire. Her brother was the ruler of the South, so knowing Little Red Riding Hood could eventually go home, well, Eva wasn't so sure, especially since she'd have to take her there herself. Because for a wolf, entering dragon territory was basically a suicide mission. Noticing Eva's pensive look, Rachel said she could never repay her. Though Eva wasn't asking for repayment, the girl really wanted to show her gratitude somehow. Until her memory returned, Little Red Riding Hood asked if she could stay here. In that moment, the half-breed knew her entire plan was about to go up in smoke, and her life was about to descend into utter poverty. Meanwhile, the search for the missing girl continued even at night, but they still had nothing. Upon hearing she hadn't been found, the captain wondered what in the world his men were doing. He immediately ordered them to find her, threatening to have their heads. All he could think about was Rachel. The next day, her guardian sister bought Rachel new clothes and took her to see a doctor. Little Red Riding Hood had accepted that she had to call her sister, but she didn't understand why they had to cover their faces. Eve said it was to prevent catching a cold, a lame excuse taken straight from Little Red Riding Hood's script. A handsome man suddenly appeared from around the corner, calling Eve's name with a bright smile. There was a secret alley near the square that no one knew about, where Eve would slip in to sell herbs to her clients. She had brought some good stuff today, and a regular customer had his eye on the flame grass. The half-breed wanted to trade some top-grade flame grass for 10 gold bars. To keep her identity a secret, she needed to cover her face and alter her voice during deals. After suggesting a cheaper way to buy it, Eva asked the Lord to check on the girl. The doctor was direct, agreeing immediately and noting how skinny she was. The little one was clearly anxious, but he told her not to worry, saying he wasn't a stranger. The doctor was also curious. The girl didn't know why she had fainted and couldn't remember anything. She wasn't feeling too well now either. The after effects of her injury seemed severe. Usually in these cases, the patient's memory returns within a few days. However, to be sure, the doctor needed to know exactly what happened to her. She was very weak, and her temperature was still alarmingly high. Since she had a fever a few days ago, Eve thought it hadn't gone down yet. Suddenly, the doctor recalled a rumor about a missing child from the South, the captain's sister. When it came to the relationship between the North and South, the heroine's mind went blank. Of course she knew. As a member of the Wolf clan, it was impossible not to. The master, completely unaware of what she was thinking, just told her to be careful. This conversation made Eve decide on the spot to send Rachel back where she belonged. If this continued, she would be completely screwed. If the dragons found out the truth, they would kill her. Despite her worries, the benefactor called the girl home for dinner. The unbelievably cute protagonist from the novel was ready to devour anything the hostess made. Now Eve was psyching herself up to stay calm, knowing this kid would never kill her benefactor. Rachel looked around and suddenly noticed a dream catcher, the kind that catches nightmares. At the mention of nightmares, her expression completely changed, her gaze dropping to the floor as her breathing slowed. Rachel's gloomy red eyes reminded Eve of a scene from the novel. After losing her only brother, Little Red Riding Hood never had a peaceful night's sleep again. The moment she closed her eyes, the same nightmare would begin to torment her. It wasn't until she met Zion that she was able to overcome the pain and torment that ate away at her soul and heart. Even though they were at the beginning of the story, Eve didn't hesitate to buy the girl a dream catcher. She was driven by the simple wish that from now on, Little Red Riding Hood would only have good dreams. It was truly the best gift Rachel had ever received from her sister-like guardian. In this chaotic situation, Eve didn't even realize she had become the savior of the very heroine who would eventually kill her. After visiting the market, Eve finally returned home, where her 2 children were waiting for her. They had been playing nicely, patiently waiting for her return. Now Zion could help her braid her hair. She tried to remain calm, hoping Zion hadn't shown the girl his ears. Hopefully, Rachel suspected nothing, but the thought still bothered her. Judging by her reaction, she hadn't discovered their secret yet. The moment the half-breed decided to take Rachel in, they gave her a new name, Ruby. Even though the girl had read a novel with her name in it, she couldn't just start using it. It was a good thing she and Zion were getting along well. The girl's eyes shone like rubies. She was a real beauty. After Rachel's arrival, there were some small changes at home, but Zion kept asking why Ruby had to eat cold food. You see, the problem was people sensitive to the cold like those two and Zion preferred warmth, and that included their food. Rachel's sad face made Eve a little dejected, but she was relieved to see the kid eat everything. But that night, the gift of food combined with her own unusually high body temperature was what made Ruby sick. The dragon's fire element was very strong. She should have thought of it sooner. Now the only way Eve could help her was by using her ice magic to cool her down. Fortunately, the exposure to the cold during the day had cooled her off, and she recovered quickly. Eve just told everyone that the kid only ate cold food because she still had a fever. One cold morning, as our girl was about to head to the market, she saw a sleepy-eyed Ruby. The child ran into her arms, begging her not to leave and to sleep a little longer together. After a while, the girl brought out a gold pendant, saying she found it in the forest. She was very sorry for sneaking into the forest without permission, where wolves could have caught her, even though her guardian had told her not to go. Knowing Ruby was bored at home, she warned her she could be attacked if she wandered around alone. But honestly, refusing the little cutie was much harder than it looked. Eve promised to be back early and suggested they have a snowball fight later. After tucking the child into bed, she said she'd keep the ring safe for her and then left. Hearing that she would keep it safe, Rachel thought her guardian was a real killjoy. In her eyes, this guardian was an idiot for not even catching her hint about wanting to sell the ring. The dragon child was convinced that being this stupid was a sin. A few days ago, news came from the south that Rachel had contracted a mysterious illness. It caused her to have a fever. After trying various treatments, the lady was at her wit's end, as the girl's condition showed no improvement. It was time to prepare for the worst. It all started when Rachel was diagnosed with an idiopathic disease. The captain didn't believe it in his heart. He thought it was impossible for her to have inherited the disease. The lady was worried and told him to control the fire element within him so he wouldn't be in danger. Suddenly hearing his sister's voice, the Lord ran to her in complete confusion. The moment they touched, the fire element in her body would surge, posing a threat to them both. So the young man immediately pulled his hand back, saying he didn't expect her to suddenly collapse. Then, tears streamed from Rachel's eyes. The nightmare she had truly terrified her. From that day on, the legend of the dragon with only one heart spread throughout the city. Rachel believed these stories were somehow connected to her brother, so she insisted on saving him no matter what. She promised to return after dealing with the rumors about him. It wasn't until weeks later that we found out she had gone to the north. The captain couldn't believe they had seen a girl resembling his sister in the square, supposedly with a stranger. He thought the guy had some nerve, trying to lure his sister with a mere toy. The captain immediately decided to go there himself, because no one shady was getting near Rachel. Soon, just as Eve was about to head home, she suddenly heard someone's voice nearby. The strange guy apologized and wanted to know if she had anything interesting to sell today. Eve thought he was just another addict, and though she was poor, she had her limits, which was the perfect reason not to get involved in his dirty business and refuse him. Her morals wouldn't allow her to deal with addicts, but there was a more important reason. Like all addicts, this guy was scum, and he thought her ring looked expensive and wanted to buy it. Eva named a price, 50 million gold bars. The guy thought she was just joking, saying he couldn't earn that much in a lifetime. He got angry and was about to beat her to a pulp, which was exactly why Eva hated addicts. To cool him down, the wolf girl attacked him with the magic of the north. She didn't want to watch this farce and just wanted to get back to her two lovely children. As she left, she told him that even if he could come up with the money, she wouldn't give up the ring because it was priceless. Eva decided to give the ring to the girl. Although she claimed to have just found it, Eva didn't believe her. The thought of the dragon captain not knowing where his sister was sent shivers down her spine. They said he was madly in love with his sister, so Eva figured the search wouldn't take too long. Although their place was hard to find, hidden deep in the forest. Then it hit her that she had told the children to stay inside no matter what. This woman was a kidnapper. As she approached the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her. It was clear that if he could follow her all the way deep into the forest, he was not someone to be taken lightly. Knowing he was hiding, the ice mage's daughter encased an apple in ice and ordered the stranger to show himself. Meanwhile, inside the house, little Zion was playing the brave wolf and the scary dragon, but he kept feeling cold, and Rachel couldn't understand why. She decided to make the fire bigger, and with a wave of her hand, a familiar feeling suddenly washed over her. Noticing she was about to leave, Zion reminded her that their sister didn't want them leaving the house without permission. In this situation, Little Red Riding Hood couldn't just obey. She had to go save her. The only person she had to save was her sister, the one she and Zion shared. Ava thought the person following her must be Little Red Riding Hood's brother. But a dragon would have revealed himself immediately instead of playing hide-and-seek like this. So she considered that maybe the doctor had ratted them out to the wolves. Suddenly, Eva heard a rustle in the bushes and threw an ice apple, hitting her target dead on. You'd think it would take anyone down, but there was still no sound, no attack. She listened in the silence, telling the stranger to come out and say what they wanted. Just as she was giving up on them revealing themselves, she felt 1,000 eyes on her back. The wolf girl had thought only 1 or 2 people were following her, but there were far more. Then, flames erupted at her feet, trapping her, and she knew she couldn't handle this alone. The worst part was knowing her fate, because in the original story, Rachel went on a complete rampage. With every drop from the melting apple, Eve understood more and more that she was being attacked, because she had hit her with that apple. In that instant, everything exploded. The dragon leader demanded the girl tell him where she had hidden his sister. Realizing he had misunderstood, Eve choked up, unable to say a word. Even though she tried to say she had done nothing wrong, you can't mess with dragons. He had no mercy and no patience for such nonsense. Convinced that Eve was the kidnapper, the girl felt it was so unfair, so outrageous, and blurted out that he should at least hear her out. The moment she grabbed the dragon's hand, time seemed to stand still around them. Their opposing powers collided, whipping up a frenzy of pure energy. Seeing the flames die down, the Lord was confused. He couldn't figure out who she was. The truth was, Eve had been doing her best to care for his sister, and that kindness was priceless. In her last moments before passing out, she used her final breath to call him a heartless bastard. Just then, Rachel's voice came from the woods, furious that her brother would treat Eve that way. In her eyes, her own brother had become the villain. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself lying in her room and thought it had all been a dream. The last thing she remembered was Rachel screaming and running toward her. It was then that Eve remembered the mad dragon was there too, realizing it wasn't a dream at all. Seeing their sister awake, the children immediately threw themselves on her. It turned out they had been watching over her the whole time. Although it was unexpected, Eve was still very grateful for their hard work. Zion had been the most scared. He thought his sister was dead. Rachel was terrified too, but honestly, they were overreacting a little. The important thing was that everyone was safe now, though seeing her little angels so upset, Eve could barely hold it together. Zion told her that Little Red Riding Hood's brother had just stepped out for a moment, saying he'd be right back. When that wolf girl touched his hand, he felt all his strength being drained away. Luckily, her ears weren't showing. If they had seen her true form, she would have been done for. Suddenly, there was a creak, and the Dragon Clan chief noticed the door was absolute trash, offering no security whatsoever. The moment their eyes met, Eve was completely speechless. Seeing she was awake, the master breathed a sigh of relief. He had looked like he was about to go crazy. The girl took a closer look and realized he was actually quite handsome. Soon, they were all sitting around a round table, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. First, the man introduced himself as Noel Ramirez and said he had a ton of questions, but he felt he should first apologize for what happened in the woods. It turned out he was much kinder and more polite than Eve had expected. It seemed she knew nothing about dragons. Come to think of it, it made sense that he would attack. If she found her Zion had been taken, she would have gone crazy too. But that wasn't to say he hadn't gone too far, she thought. For this whole mess, she deserved some kind of compensation. But honestly, Noel himself was a form of compensation. It seemed Eve's wolf instincts were starting to kick in. Getting back to the point, Noel said he was Rachel's brother. His sister had suddenly disappeared, and he had tracked her all the way here, but the girls claimed they had no idea who Rachel was. This handsome guy really was her brother. Eve couldn't let him know that she knew, so she played dumb. Since the girl was sticking to her story, her sister wasn't about to just believe his word either. Noel swore he wasn't lying and held out his hand for Rachel to give him hers. The dragon power sealed in their hands was unleashed, proving their blood relationship. Terrified, Rachel immediately pulled her hand back and fell backward, frightened by the flames erupting from her own hand. Seeing Zion's confused expression, Eve guessed he was scared by the flames too. Little Rachel was very scared, her eyes never leaving her sister. To comfort her, Zion also grabbed her hand, even though he didn't understand what was happening. Although Noel didn't understand what was wrong with his sister, Little Red Riding Hood's mood seemed to improve a little. She was desperately denying her innate connection, a connection to the Dragon Clan. Right now, in his sister's eyes, Noel was the bad guy, and it was painful for Eve to watch from the side. Seeing him grow more and more frustrated, the heroine decided to tell him the full story of her first encounter with the girl. After hearing the story, Noel was resentful because his sister had fainted because of those damn wolves. He suddenly asked if everything was all right, then realized he needed to put out the fire. But here was the problem. Noel Ramirez was considered the strongest hero in the history of Little Red Riding Hood, possessing extraordinary magical talent, described as someone who could conquer raging flames with a single heart. However, this meant he had trouble controlling his emotions and the power of his flames, putting his life in danger. His uncontrollable flames were extinguished by Eve because she possessed the ability of ice. Even so, there were still many mages whose abilities far surpassed hers. As far as she knew, the North was full of wolves with similar abilities. In any case, this was just a hypothesis. The girl couldn't say she was a wolf. She had practiced saying she wasn't a wolf 1,000 times. But human. Just as Eve was gathering her thoughts, Rachel suddenly interrupted, wanting to kick that scary guy out. The problem was, he wasn't just some random passerby. You could tell they looked alike at a glance. Rachel denied their relationship, deciding he was bad news simply because he had upset her sister. It turned out Zion felt the same way, and now both children were demanding he be thrown out. To keep the man from going crazy, Eve tried to comfort him, saying her memories would return soon. Every time he tried to touch his sister, it ended in failure. Rachel just didn't like him, so she wanted to live with her sister. That girl was just a child talking nonsense. She dreamed of taking her sister with her if she had to leave. Maybe this was Eve's fault, but no matter how cute this kid was, they had to say goodbye. It was time for her to go home. A dead silence, followed by soft sobs. Seeing his sister upset, Noel himself was about to break down. He tried to gently make the girl accept reality, just wanted her to go home as soon as possible. Since there was no other choice, Mr. Noel needed the girl to do him a huge favor. He promised it wouldn't take long, just until Rachel calmed down and trusted him again. On one hand, Eve would never meet a handsome guy like him again, so this was a golden opportunity. But on the other hand, he might find out the truth, and then she'd be dead. I mean, such a handsome man was a dream come true. But if he found out Eve was a werewolf, she was done for. Ramirez knew he was making an unreasonable request and felt bad about it, but he pleaded with her for his sister's sake. The wolf girl knew this would be a tricky business, but Noel swore he would repay her kindness. Before leaving, he hoped she would consider the deal they had discussed. The man admitted he had messed up, even though he was very sorry. If it had been Eve in his shoes, she would have done the exact same thing. The Dragon Clan chief suddenly asked her to hold his hand again, knowing it was a very awkward request. But just then, Rachel ran over, very angry that this guy was still lingering here. Since his presence still frightened the child, Noel decided to leave. Recalling the difficult day, she felt the master just wanted to see what she could do. She didn't know why, but she would rather be in a blizzard than deal with these complicated emotions. Rachel found it strange to be called by her name, and when flames erupted from her hand, she was terrified. Now the hardest part would be explaining all this to the little girl. He was scared too, but first, she needed to get her and her brother back on good terms. When she asked the girl if Noel seemed cool, Rachel immediately wanted to know all the details. Seriously, he was tall with broad shoulders. Eve had never seen anyone like him. He was totally her type. Plus, the guy's face was just ridiculously good looking. Noel seemed to be her ideal type, but werewolves and dragons were mortal enemies, so it was better to forget it. Rachel was willing to give it a try, just because her sister wanted them to be friends. As long as Eva was with her, she agreed to see him 3 times a week. The young lady, not returning with the others, caught the dragon squad a bit off guard. As for that girl, her gentle touch was enough to calm the raging fire inside the chief. Noel suddenly ordered more men to guard the house and to put them under surveillance as soon as possible. Zion dropped by to see the sisters while they were talking about Rachel's brother. It turned out the kid just straight up hated the guy, but Eva insisted it was a misunderstanding. Zion was angry to hear that. To him, Ruby was Ruby, and he wouldn't call her anything else. Eva wondered what to do now, realizing her biggest obstacle would be her own brother. With so much going on, she almost forgot she had promised the kids they would go out to play. But Zion said it was too dangerous outside, so she decided against it. Hearing this, the child was terrified and hoped to at least play near the house. Eve decided to be nice to them today and let them go out by themselves, as she had things to do. The children dressed warmly, excited to build a snowman. Before leaving, Eve warned them that if they saw a stranger, they should run home immediately. But once in the yard, Rachel ignored her sister's warning and wandered further away. It turned out she wanted to show Zion something he would really like. Not a toy, but real magic. Seeing the look of wonder in the boy's eyes, Rachel knew he loved her fire magic. A short while ago, Zion had happened to see Rachel light a fire with her bare hands. He begged her to show him again, but the little girl flatly denied doing anything. It wasn't until the child threatened to tell his sister everything that Little Red Riding Hood agreed to show him. Her flame was very warm, and the little guy kept his promise not to tell on her to their sister. The small flame wasn't big, but it was cozy, and Zion loved it. To cheer up his innocent little heart, Rachel clenched her fist, and the flame instantly vanished. It was freezing now. I guess the weather in the north is just too cold. Zion had asked his sister many times if they could move somewhere warmer, but she always refused. But he would only say why if Rachel made a fire again. It wasn't until the flame reappeared in the girl's hand that he revealed Eve had several great options for a better future. But Ruby didn't expect it to be a place no one knew about. Because of these thoughts, the flame in her hand began to grow, and the innocent Zion thought it was the coolest thing. And that's how the girl found out her sister was desperately trying to earn money to buy a castle. It was clear that Eva's favorite things were handsome men, castles, lots of money, and a hiding place no one knew about. That's when it hit Rachel, so her brother could make all of Eva's dreams come true. She knew how to make her sister's wish a reality. They had to go to that handsome guy first. First of all, it was all a misunderstanding, and he apologized too. Besides, he could take Zion to a warm place. The clever child was so happy that he accidentally let his ears show. Realizing what happened, he begged the girl to pretend she saw nothing, forgetting about his tale. He was afraid of getting scolded and hoped Rachel wouldn't tell on him to his sister. But then Little Red Riding Hood made him promise one thing, and that was not to hate her brother. Early the next morning, Eva was woken up by an unexpected knock on the door. It was Noel standing there, who said he would come by today. It had been too long. Seeing her disheveled state, the chief felt he had come too early. At this hour, Rachel was still sound asleep. The kids had played late last night, and nothing could wake them now. Seeing his sister, Noel hoped she hadn't caused Eva too much trouble. To Eva, Rachel was a good and obedient child. To be honest, she was the first person Rachel had ever listened to. Just then, the child opened her eyes. She thought the two of them looked good together. Seeing the girl close her eyes again, Eva thought she was still half asleep. Noel suddenly asked if this was their first time meeting, because the lady looked familiar. Not wanting to say for sure, she just said she had lived here her whole life, so it was impossible for them to have met. Rachel woke up with a start, muttering that this guy was a complete idiot. From the look on her face, she was in a very good mood and wished her little sister a good morning. But when she saw that guy, she completely froze, as if someone had touched her while she was asleep. Strangely, they both acted as if they didn't know each other at all. To help them, Eve came up with an idea for Rachel to hold her hand and her brother's hand as well. This way she could slowly get used to his body temperature. But the girl found this boring and just pushed the two of them closer together, just like this. In fact, Noel was terrified. He had never felt such intense cold, and it was unsettling. Eve could feel the warmth by holding his hand, and guessed this was exactly what he wanted to test. Just then, seeing them holding hands like a couple, Zion was completely confused. The child pounced on them from above, shouting that he wanted them to hold his hand too. Eve immediately stopped him, saying he couldn't act like that in front of guests, and made him sit next to her. But of all days, the child was being particularly picky today and insisted on joining the game. So Noel suggested they play the hot and cold game that Zion liked. Suddenly noticing a wolf's tail on the boy, Eve panicked, thinking this would be the start of their tragic end. She deftly hid the tail, and luckily, neither Noel nor Rachel noticed. Thinking his ears might pop out soon, she knew what kind of trouble she was in. Her panicked expression caught the chief's attention, so she did everything she could to keep him from looking down, praying that Zion wouldn't lose control. Eve noticed Noel's hands were warm. While everyone was distracted, Rachel suddenly decided to intervene and fix her little brother's hair. She thought it was kind of cute how his messy hair stuck up like puppy ears. Just then, Zion came to his senses, and his tail instantly disappeared. Noel was a friendly kid, or so he thought, but he was a bit clumsy when playing with children, and would get anxious. This little guy was well-behaved, unlike Rachel, so the chief liked him. Before Eve could stop the child, Rachel suddenly became affectionate, wanting a hope. Noel's hug was warm, like a giant, warm sun. It was the first time anyone had said that about him, and Zion also thought he was handsome and that Eve had a crush on him. Hearing this, she was dying of embarrassment, blaming it on the kids not being fully awake and talking nonsense. She was almost speechless when her brother blurted out that she liked handsome guys who cry. At that moment, she decided to cut Zion off immediately and take him away. That was enough for one day. When Zion was just a little tyke, Eve would tease him every time he started to cry. What goes around comes around. Now she begged the chief to pretend he hadn't heard anything. Ramirez was preparing to leave at sunset, saying he had to go, but promising to return. He suddenly leaned down toward Eve as if he wanted to ask her something, but couldn't find the courage. But seeing his sister's confused look, he just said never mind. It was nothing. On the way back, the Dragon Clan chief knew it was a bad idea to get involved with strangers. The risk was too great. Because of his damned heart, he had already killed too many innocent people, including his own parents. He couldn't control the terrible power and rage that boiled within him. But the real question was, how on earth did that girl tame it so easily? Even after getting his inner flame under control, Noel couldn't stop thinking about her. Just the thought of that Ice Queen made my chest tighten as if my heart was on fire. But Noel realized that he couldn't help but grin at the thought of her, and he didn't know why. This question reminded him of a dream he had a few days ago. He woke up floating in a void, completely lost, his hand hurting terribly. Then, a girl suddenly appeared in the flames, but everything was blurry, and he couldn't see her face. Knowing she would get hurt if she came closer, Noel tried to warn her to back away. But then, this bright and unknown being touched his hand, instantly extinguishing the hellfire. The pain vanished immediately, but he didn't know who she was or how she did it. Just as she was about to tell him her name, the dream was cut short. Perhaps it was because she was the only being who could save him from his fatal disease that Noel would smile unconsciously just thinking about this girl. Forget love at first sight. That was just something you read about in cheesy romance novels. Lost in these thoughts, Noel suddenly turned to see Rachel chasing after him, calling him slow. In her eyes, he was an idiot, a complete moron, dumber than a fire-breathing lizard. At least he hadn't messed up her plan. She couldn't bring Eve to such a dangerous place. Even though it wasn't safe here, Rachel didn't care. She hoped her brother would take the hint, reminding him that Eve liked men who could cry beautifully. Most importantly, Eve dreamed of living in a palace. She was a good girl who knew what she wanted and worked for it. In Rachel's opinion, her brother fit the description perfectly. She just didn't understand why he was hesitating. She was convinced he shouldn't try to talk himself out of liking her. After agreeing to help, the girl told her brother not to forget he was a man, so he needed to make the first move. The next morning, Eve was about to go out on an errand, but her little sister didn't want her to leave. Rachel decided to check out the market and, while she was at it, confirm whether that guy had paid up or not. It turned out he had given her a considerable sum, but she still needed to visit her friend. After saying goodbye, she told the child to go back to sleep and promised to be back later. Rachel knew Eve had brought a basket of herbs, even though her brother had given her a lot of money. Little Red Riding Hood fully approved of the girl's ambition. A girl like that deserved to be her stepsister. It suddenly occurred to her that Eve always covered her face when she went to sell herbs, so no one would recognize her. So she was going to meet her friend, who might actually be her boyfriend. It seemed she was trying to earn money to live happily with her man. Rachel wasn't about to entertain that idea and decided to follow her instead. But she didn't expect Zion to be awake too and want to tag along. The girl wanted to sneakily follow her sister and get back before he found out. But if she didn't take the kid, he would surely follow her anyway and get lost on the way back. Rachel agreed to take him, but only if he promised to stick close. They headed to a cold and dreary place. It was time to find Little Red Riding Hood's stepsister. On the way, Eva kept thinking about her last conversation with Rachel about the money Noel had given her. A while ago, she had been completely overwhelmed when she saw 2 large bags of gold in front of her. She thought Noel would look down on her for her strange tastes, but instead, he gave her a huge sum of money. He had looked so happy then, as if giving away money was his favorite pastime. Even though he had a lot of money, it didn't feel like enough, as if he was ready to offer more. He wanted to ask how much more he could offer, but giving in to impulses in front of a stranger was a bad move. This charming and generous man told her not to hesitate to ask for more. He could give her anything she wanted, but she bit her tongue and asked for something more valuable than money, a smile. A moment later, Eve decided to go for it, her instincts taking over again. Noel said he would give her as much money as she needed, but she was afraid she might ask for a huge amount. Just holding his hand made his cheeks flush with shyness. Shy men were totally her type. Now that our girl was rich, she could make her last delivery and then go back to the kids. Just then, a man's voice called out. It was one of her old customers calling for her. He was a merchant who was always traveling for work, so he knew a lot of things. Sometimes he would tell Eve interesting stories, but he didn't know she was a girl. Those tigers in the East are obsessed with healthy vegetables, so they love herbs. This was a strange fact he revealed. Eve brought extra because he asked, and maybe this was her last day selling herbs. He reacted quickly, and the merchant started freaking out about where to get food for the tigers now. Anyway, he started looking into how to contact those illegal immigration brokers. Speaking of which, he hoped the herb seller knew they had a new boss now. Eve held her breath, finding out that illegal immigration had been completely banned. The merchant claimed there was still time and suggested waiting until the ban was lifted, but he didn't know that Eve was really running out of time. Unexpectedly, the old customer decided to give her a farewell gift. You couldn't find such a rare herb in any shop or anywhere else. It was practically like a drug. She thought the merchant was crazy, so she refused him and gave the package back. She was more honest than he thought, but he still invited her to taste the wonderful flavors this new world had to offer. A world of death when the cold comes. That's why Eve decided to throw the stuff away on her way home. The problem is the cold of the north won't kill you, but heat stroke will. He was face to face with death. She had wanted to move to a warmer place, but she never expected things to turn out this way. Now our poor girl has no choice but to stay and take care of Rachel. The only thing that could calm her down was seeing the children, but the door was unlocked and the place was empty. Zion and Rachel were gone. Worried something had happened to them, Eve panicked and rushed back into the woods. She kept calling the children's names, hoping they would respond, but her intuition told her they weren't in the forest. She tried to figure out where they could have gone when it suddenly hit her that maybe they went to the town square. Rachel was different here and would be very conspicuous. She had to be found as soon as possible. They weren't there, not in the alley where they used to sell herbs, nor on the street they liked to walk on. With no idea where they could be, Eve began to blame herself for not watching over them. With her vision blurred by tears, she ran frantically forward and ended up bumping right into a man. The person under the black hood turned out to be Noel, and upon seeing her face, he knew something terrible had happened. Eve couldn't hide the truth and confessed that the children were missing, blaming herself for leaving them home alone. She was only thinking about money, a completely irresponsible sister. When she returned, the children were already gone, and the heavy weight of her mistake finally crushed her. After hearing this, the first thing Noel did was to calm her down, telling her that this was really not the time to cry. Without a second thought, she rushed out, intending to find them. The only thing she could do was pray that Rachel and Zion would be safe until she found them. Meanwhile, little Zion was growing more and more suspicious that they had come to the wrong place. Looking at the scary guys holding knives, he felt that they didn't belong here. He was indeed scared, but having come this far, Rachel was determined to find her sister. She also told the kid to stop crying, as she had no interest in crybabies. Rachel thought Eve's taste was a bit strange, and Zion, who decided to support her, was crying because of it. In any case, it was time for them to leave this place. But after all was said and done, Zion was so upset that he ran off crying, wanting to find his sister on his own. If he kept running, he would end up in the central square and would surely be discovered. Realizing the situation and all the risks, Rachel knew she had no other choice. The girl decided to use her fire magic to forcibly stop him. As it turned out, Zion, the complete fool, actually liked fire, especially since Rachel had never said a single bad thing about his sister. Regardless of who she liked, Eve was the future sister-in-law she admired most. It seemed the problem was solved. The best way to make the naive wolf wag his tail was with a little fire. Rachel had thought no one was around until she saw the man behind her who had witnessed her use of flames. She told him he saw wrong, but it was obvious she couldn't hide herself with a thin scarf. Hearing him accuse her of starting a fire, The brave girl shielded her younger brother. Judging from the man's dead eyes, this guy was dangerous. Rachel fearlessly displayed her draconic power, telling him it was none of his business and to get lost. She fearlessly warned him not to come any closer, or she would burn him to a crisp. Seeing the ring on her finger, the man finally understood why that female merchant had rejected him. The bastard just smirked, disbelieving that a dragon would dare to appear in the north. She dared to speak to him with such an attitude and even threaten his life. Now, the guy was calculating that he could make a fortune by selling these two children. Worried for his sister, Zion started yelling at the villain to let her go. He paid the price for it, and now the secret of his mixed blood was also exposed. Rachel needed to protect Zion, but she couldn't even breathe. Just then, the unexpected happened. An explosion of fire erupted behind the bandit, the flames engulfing his body. This piece of trash dared to lay his filthy hands on the girl, which Noel considered an insult. He unleashed the full fury of his dragon form on the guy who had dared to touch the children. The unbearable, searing pain burned the man, who could only beg pathetically for mercy. Noel weighed his fate, contemplating what to do with this annoying wolf. Suddenly, he felt a touch. It was Zion, begging him to stop, tears streaming down his face. He was truly terrified. It was like a complete emotional breakdown. Unable to control his own power, Noel fell to his knees and apologized. The peace and happiness he had experienced these past few days had almost blinded him, making him nearly forget who he was. Wolves were his enemies, destined to be killed. But a single thought stopped him. He might be frightened. The mere thought of it sent a chill through his heart. When the flames suddenly died out, the surviving guy accused the commander of trying to kill him. According to him, you can't provoke wolves on their own territory. He was about to go find the alpha wolf when he suddenly shut his mouth. Eve threw an ice apple at him. She couldn't believe that scumbag would do such a thing. Even after the guy passed out, she continued to curse him for daring to do it, for daring to touch the girl with his filthy paws. Eve felt this scum had to be finished off as soon as possible. Furious, she thought a loser like him deserved nothing but hell, and she grabbed an apple, preparing to finish him. Just then, Noel rushed over and snatched the apple from her hand. He couldn't let her become so cruel, and though she tried to break free to kill the bastard, he was certain she had lost her mind. Rachel suddenly realized she didn't want Eve as her sister-in-law. She would rather have a wife like that for herself. It wasn't until the wolf girl's strength was spent and she let out a breath that Noel supported her by the waist and touched her face. He apologized, hoping she had calmed down now. Only then did she realize what she had done, and she appeared to be coming to her senses. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a child crying. Little Zion was very upset and just wanted to hug his sister. But Eve, still angry, questioned why he had left the house without permission after she had told him to wait. She had always lived in fear of something like this happening, so she had tried to protect her younger brother from it. It's impossible to imagine how worried Eve was, terrified that the little one would get hurt. Zion knew he was wrong for disobeying, but thankfully he was all right, which was a huge relief. Feeling guilty, Rachel couldn't bear to watch and admitted it was her fault. She said she was the one who asked Zion to go with her, as tears began to well up in her eyes. Zion denied it, saying he was the one who asked Rachel to go out and then ran away from her. Eve felt it was all her fault, that she should never have left the two of them alone. Rachel didn't shirk responsibility either, continuing to blame herself for her strange taste. But Zion still insisted that her taste wasn't strange, just special. Right to the end, the children kept blaming themselves, promising to cherish each other and respect one another's choices. Noel suddenly interrupted them, admitting that the girl's preferences were indeed a bit wild. It was time to stop crying and go home. But first, the children had to thank the mister for saving their lives. Without a second thought, Zion threw himself into his arms. Without Noel, they would have been in big trouble. For Rachel, thanking her brother was much more difficult. She shyly mumbled a thank you. It seemed Noel was finally making his move. He opened his arms, ready to embrace the little one. The girl, grinning from ear to ear, rushed into his arms. They must have been truly happy now. Zion was starving, so Eve suggested they buy some groceries on the way. But just then, Rachel suddenly realized she had lost something. Back in the alley, Eve offered to go back and look for it, asking what she had dropped, but Rachel wanted to stay with her brother. Noel told them to take Zion and go on ahead, assuring them they would catch up soon. That scumbag in the alley almost died, and now these people need something from him again. He deserved it. He shouldn't have scared Rachel and Zion, and now he's going to pay the price for upsetting my future sister-in-law. By nightfall, the children were finally asleep, and Eve could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Suddenly, Noel asked if she was okay, but he wasn't asking about the children. He wanted to know how Eve was. As his hand gently caressed her cheek, her eyes were visibly red. She insisted she was fine, just really frightened, and felt that everything that had happened was her fault. Noel told her not to blame herself, that she would learn from this incident and it wouldn't happen again. She shouldn't blame herself for what the children did. In the eyes of the dragon commander, she had handled it well and had done her best to protect them. Hearing that he wanted to give her something, she panicked and ran out to gather herbs. The fresh, crisp air was like a cleansing stream, like the first snow covering the earth. Too much had happened today. She had never imagined things would turn out like this, so she couldn't easily let it go now. Deciding to clear her head before going home was the right choice. The next day, Eve felt very unwell. She was sick. She couldn't believe a short walk in the evening had given her a cold. Sensing she had a fever, Noel said she needed to take some medicine as soon as possible. He took it upon himself to brew the herbal tea, the kind that was effective for a common cold. It seemed things were looking up. Even Zion wanted to help, but he had completely forgotten that he couldn't use fire. Watching them pick through piles of herbs, the heroine's eyelids began to grow heavy. She didn't even notice she had fallen asleep until she opened her eyes again to Noel handing her the medicine. Being sick gave her a splitting headache, but this herbal tea should ease the symptoms. Eve tasted the bitterness after just one sip, but she gritted her teeth and finished the whole bowl. Now it was time to get some sleep. Noel left the rest of the tea on the table for her to drink when she woke up. Was it because of her weakness? She wondered, but when his hand touched her, she felt as if she were caught between heaven and hell. Through his touch, you could feel his love and his desire to care for her. Eve soon fell into a deep sleep. She was completely unaware of what was happening, and when she finally woke up, she realized she had slept for an entire day. But instead of her own hands, the girl saw wolf paws and a tail behind her. She had turned into a real she-wolf. She couldn't believe it. She had been unconscious for hours only to wake up as an animal. For a moment, she thought she was still dreaming, that this was just a crazy fantasy. So Eve tried to calm herself down, closing her eyes and counting to 10, hoping everything would soon return to normal. She only got to 8 before realizing it wasn't a dream. She was just trying to deny what was happening. Confused, she tried to figure out what had happened when she suddenly caught an interesting scent. Although her nose was stuffy from the cold, she could still smell the unpleasant odor. Eve had asked Noel to make tea with the herbs from her basket, but those herbs had no side effects. Seeing the blue herb on the table, the girl couldn't believe she had drunk a potion made from such a rare ingredient. No wonder she had transformed, even though this had never happened in the story. Now, the wolf girl had to find a way to turn back into a human before they arrived. Just imagining the scene of her younger siblings finding out the truth, she knew she was done for. The priority was to get out of here, so she could change back when the potion wore off. Thinking Eve was still asleep, Rachel tiptoed into the room, trying not to wake her. When she saw the white wolf before her, the girl was stunned and froze on the spot. She was speechless, and from the look on her face, she knew exactly what had happened. But Zion didn't seem to get it. He just thought it was magic. They had lived in the forest their whole lives, so he had never seen another wolf, and Eve had never told him what a wolf looked like. Those ears and tail looked familiar. In that moment, the girl prayed they wouldn't recognize her. Just as Zion was about to say who she looked like, Rachel suddenly covered his mouth, saying it was a dog. She stared straight at the snow-white creature, insisting she had seen something similar before. But Zion found it strange that his sister was gone, and then this dog appeared. Zion always got smart at the wrong times, so he guessed it had something to do with his sister. Eve decided she had to do something, using her wolfish charm to distract them. As soon as Zion took the bait, Rachel guessed that her sister had a fever and just needed to cool down. Watching him snuggle with the dog, you could almost feel sorry for the sister who was forced to pretend to be a dog because of these two. The heroine almost forgot her own desperate situation. When a man's voice rang out, it was clear the final boss was about to make his entrance. The first thing he wanted to know was what that thing was doing here. He felt that acting cute wouldn't work. This commander wasn't so easily fooled. Just as she was racking her brain for a solution, the children chimed in, saying it was just a puppy. Rachel, dead set on keeping the dog, started vying for its attention, saying it wasn't just any ordinary dog. Noel was completely taken aback by this. He had never seen his sister act this way. But suddenly, a more important matter pushed those thoughts aside. Eve was gone. The herbs were scattered on the table, and the bed was messy, as if she had jumped up and run off in a hurry. The sudden appearance of this mutt made Noel suspicious. The look on his face showed he was in a terrible mood. Eve knew him well and knew he would get angry soon. But she also knew she couldn't scare the children with fire, so she made up her mind that she had to prevent a disaster. Regardless, she stood before the fearsome Noel, gently stepped on his foot, and gave him a pitiful, puppy dog look. Although Eve hoped he would forgive her this time, it was clear this tactic wasn't working. It seemed she could only accept her death, and the worst part was that she would die in the form of a wolf. But Noel didn't notice her charm. He understood Rachel now, with her sky-blue eyes and her fur, the most beautiful he had ever seen. The commander's mood shifted in an instant, and Eve had finally succeeded. She felt his gentle touch and didn't mind continuing to act cute, but seeing her pretend so sweetly, Noel felt she didn't have to try so hard. He decided to go gather firewood and told his sister to take care of the puppy, as it was clearly confused. Thinking Eve had gone out for a walk, he told the children to watch the house until he returned. The dragon commander nearly bit his tongue off to keep from attacking her. He didn't know she was the wolf, and if Rachel hadn't stopped him, he would have blasted her to Kingdom Come. Not knowing what to do now, Noel's anger and out-of-control power clouded his mind, making him extremely irritated. After he left, Rachel breathed a sigh of relief and suggested they get ready for bed. She felt the puppy needed to sleep too, and it would also give her sister a chance to change back in peace. Eve wouldn't have survived if Rachel hadn't stopped Noel, and she was very grateful for that. However, she still didn't know how to turn back into a human. The girl had calmed him down, but now there was a risk of not being able to change back, and the potion was already making her eyelids heavier and heavier. Just then, Eve decided not to put too much pressure on herself and just give herself some time to recover. Under the cover of night, she changed back into her human form. Today had definitely been a tough day. Noel came home late, by which time the girl had already changed back. He was sure she must have been terrified when she realized she had turned into a wolf. He was mostly curious about how she would react when she found out he knew everything. At first, he had used Rachel as an excuse to get closer to Eve, to understand her better. If she was the wolf from the legend, Noel would have to take her heart to save his own life. But now that he had fallen in love with her and decided to stay by her side forever, all the deeply buried emotions came flooding out. The dragon didn't want to hurt her. He wanted to be with her forever. To do that, he needed to do something to make Eve choose him. Sir Rainier had to become someone she truly liked. If he could control his powers, he would use them to keep her warm. Feeling his warmth, the girl flinched, and the master immediately withdrew his hand. But when Eve grabbed his hand and pulled him closer, Noel knew his one and only heartbeat. For him, it was either soaring high like the moon in the sky or falling to the mortal world. In that awkward moment, the man prayed to a god he had never believed in, hoping Eve would fall in love with him. The next morning, the heroine woke up feeling that the weather seemed a bit warmer today. Just then, she reconsidered, seeing Noel asleep right in front of her. He was holding her hand tightly, and she hoped he hadn't noticed her tail and ears. The girl couldn't believe he had sat there all night. She had even thought he might tie her up and interrogate her. Just as Eve decided to run, he woke up and she heard his voice. Noel could feel she was awake. He held her hand tighter and explained that she had gone for a walk last night and caught a cold. The thought of holding his hand all night terrified Eve, who confirmed his story. Shortly after, the commander decided to leave. He actually found the girl a bit cute. Although Eve hoped Rachel's memory had returned and she could go with her brother, the girl claimed she remembered nothing. That being the case, the heroine apologized for holding Noel's hand for so long, feeling he hadn't slept well. Unexpectedly, she even offered to help him anytime he needed it. Eve was prepared to do anything to please him. Well then, if she didn't mind, Noel asked her to stroke his hair. Not knowing why he was being so forward today, Rachel still decided to help. She pretended her brother Zion was already waiting for her, so she was in a hurry to leave. In that moment, everything inside Eve crumbled. She felt awkward being alone with the commander. Every time Noel held her hand, he felt a little colder. Holding hands was probably fine, but she really should have messed up my hair. The thought that Eve didn't want to touch his hair struck Noel as odd. He knew the request was a bit much, but he couldn't shake the memory of that cold moment they shared. To stop him from saying anything else strange, Eve finally agreed to stroke him. With a racing heart, the wolf girl was stroking the dragon commander. As her heart pounded, Noel thought he must look like a complete fool right now. A few days later, Eve realized that something had happened to the children while she was away. So she decided to take them out for a walk, but they had to stay nearby. Zion turned to his sister and suggested they go to the bookstore together. Eve thought it was a good opportunity to buy some books about the human world, so she told the children to be quiet. The children were very excited in the bookstore, but their sister kept reminding them to keep their hoods on. Suddenly surrounded by countless books, our girl found the passionate romance novel she had been looking for. She remembered that before her reincarnation, she had read a similar novel where the male lead always cried in front of the girl. It suddenly occurred to her that she should buy it since she had a lot of free time now. Noticing an empty shelf, Eve realized the books about the human world were sold out. When she asked the clerk, she hoped they were just sold out, but she never expected to hear that the books had been banned due to the problem of illegal immigration to the human world. According to the clerk, their king was furious, so they had removed the books until things calmed down. In the end, she bought a book she didn't really care about, thinking she was trapped in the north forever. Late at night, when they returned, everyone was asleep except for Rachel. She was sure she had overheard her sister talking about the human world and guessed she wanted to move there. Realizing they might never see each other again, the girl decided to stop her no matter what. She used her power to summon a fire phoenix and asked it for a favor. Rachel told it to fetch the book Eve had bought that morning. Since she hadn't told anyone, the book must be related to her moving plans. But when she saw it was an adult romance novel, the girl couldn't believe her eyes. She had never thought her sister was that kind of person. To get to the bottom of it, she had the Phoenix memorize a passage from the novel and deliver it to her brother. Soon, the Firebird relayed everything hidden in that romance novel to the young man. After discovering Eve's true preferences, Noel was so ashamed he turned bright red and was completely speechless. Now that he was determined to please Eve, he had to go all out and become an attractive crybaby. But it's no use reading sad stories if you can't even squeeze out a single tear. When he saw Rachel, known as the Phoenix, in his office, he guessed something must have happened to her. It turned out to be a message from his sister, telling Noel to find out Eva's ideal type as soon as possible. When he learned what kind of man his crush liked, he was utterly speechless. Her ideal type was a man who was sexy and masculine with a charming smile, and most importantly, they had to be like a hyena. Realizing he had nothing in common with her ideal type, Noel felt it was no time to be learning how to cry. Even though it was late at night, he prepared to head north to ask her about it in person. His servant desperately tried to stop him, frantically reminding him of a meeting the next day. All he could think about was what on earth was happening in the north that made Noel fly there every day. When the sun rose, the children excitedly ran outside to play, inviting their sister to join them. But Eva told them not to worry about her and just have fun. She suddenly realized she should have brought them out to play sooner. Still, they were having a great time now. She had been so engrossed in that novel last night that she completely lost track of time. He was consumed by lust all night, a fire burning in his chest, which is why he traveled a great distance to be with his beloved. That's what the hyena said. The man's tan skin and handsome appearance were not Eva's type at all. She hadn't read a romance novel with a captivity theme in a long time, so it was her own fault for not paying close attention to the plot. It wasn't that she disliked healthy men, but she preferred the type that made her feel pity. Eva liked men with long fingers, black hair, preferably fair skin, and a gentle smile. If she could choose, she would want someone like Noel. Shaking off these thoughts, she suddenly heard a loud noise from the woods. It was Noel, making a very grand entrance. Against the backdrop of the white snow, he looked even more dazzling. Eva found this strange, as they hadn't arranged to meet today. If you remember correctly, Zion had said she liked pretty boys who cry, but the information Rachel gave was completely different. Yesterday, curious about who she really liked, Noel decided to give it a try. He said he had been tormented all night by a raging fire in his chest, which was why he had traveled a great distance to see Eva. She could hardly believe it. His words were identical to the hyena's lines. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence, until Noel confidently asked her to cool him down. Seriously, that move would never work. Eva was a wolf, after all. Watching her brother clumsily try to seduce the girl, Rachel couldn't understand what on earth he was doing. I mean, she had practically spelled out how to win her heart. Noel could have at least gotten a tan like that hyena. His sister gave him such a perfect hint, and he still messed it up. Fuming with anger, Rachel didn't even hear what Zion was saying. She decided right then and there that Eva would be her wife. After that incident, Zion didn't want to play with her anymore, but she clearly didn't care. Sometimes he couldn't understand what she said at all, even though he really wanted to play with her. Rachel used to play with him, but now her coldness stung him. Zion could certainly play by himself, but he was fed up with her and didn't want to play with her anymore. The angry boy walked off alone deeper into the woods, where he stumbled upon something strange. As he bent down to pick it up, he had no idea what would happen next. Okay, Noel might be a bit embarrassed now, but Eva shouldn't have just started unbuttoning his shirt. The hyena look didn't suit him at all, so he was sure the girl wouldn't like it. But when he felt her touch, honestly, he felt much better, just like the last time Eva had touched him. Back then, he had been so jealous of the children that he blurted it out without thinking. Blushing from the gentleness of her hands, Noel couldn't believe she still remembered. To win over such a sweet girl, he had to go all out and figure out her ideal type. Although it was super awkward, the guy was definitely enjoying the tenderness. At this moment, Eva enveloped him with her gentleness, hoping he was okay. She noticed he had missed a button and decided to help him out. Noel blamed the unbuttoning on the damn heat. He said he couldn't take it anymore, apologized, and promised to be more careful next time, hiding his embarrassment if Eva didn't like it. In that moment, she was reminded of her parents. She didn't know what to do. She had finally met her ideal type, but he was a dragon. Meanwhile, in the woods, Zion found a beautiful stone. It was the same color as Ruby's eyes, but as he was taking it home, he suddenly locked eyes with a mysterious stranger. The man claimed he was fine, but his smile was very strange. His sister had once told him to be wary of people with shifty eyes. It seemed tricking Zion wouldn't be easy. After all, his sister had told him not to talk to strangers. However, deceiving wary children was this cool-haired man's specialty. When he saw the man's hair color change, Zion couldn't believe his eyes. It turned out to be a crazy ability. This guy was a chameleon who could change his color at will. Now that he had the little brat handled, it was time to get down to business. After asking what the child was holding, the man learned he had just stumbled upon the stone. The stone seemed a little warm. The stranger suggested Zion give it to his precious sister. The man even said he knew a place with lots of these stones, but the child started to cry. This was unexpected. It turned out his sister really liked Ruby. His sister said Ruby was very warm and that she could hug it every day. Compared to them, Zion felt he was just a cold child. He thought that if he had a stone like this, maybe his sister would hug him too. But deep down, he knew his sister didn't like him, and no stone could change that. Hearing this, the stranger was on the verge of tears. He couldn't stand seeing others sad and crying. He tried to convince the child that it was impossible for his sister not to love him, that she actually did. Zion would understand when he grew up, but for now, he didn't know what to do. The stranger told him not to hate his sister. Maybe she didn't show it, but deep down she loved him very much. Thanks to this man, Zion felt a little better. Apparently, his sister would be very happy to receive the small stone, and then all the child's worries would disappear. They cried for a while, but now it was time to get back to work. Mission accomplished. As long as the child took the bait, getting close to the girl would be easier. The chameleon needed to handle this well. Just when no one expected it, a little girl emerged from the forest. Seeing the man in the woods, she held her breath, not understanding why he was here. Moreover, she wanted to know why Zion had abandoned everyone. He just ran off without a word. Because of him, she couldn't even properly monitor her brother and sister-in-law. Their relationship must have improved. It seemed Eva was being drawn in by Noel's shyness. Suddenly, Rachel yelled at Zion, saying his sister's ideal type was not a hyena. But seeing he was gone, even though he was useless, she was furious that he had snuck away. She told the kid he'd better come up with a damn good excuse before approaching her. Under pressure from his furious sister, Zion broke down, and to avoid being a traitor, he walked up to her. Now, Rachel wanted to know who this man was and ordered him to spill everything he knew. Just a short while ago, everyone had been on edge because not only was the young lady missing, but the commander hadn't returned either. Someone thought it was like he was secretly keeping a pet there. Of course, the officer was very sure of what he said and wouldn't speak without proof. The others couldn't believe it. Not only did the commander go there often, but he also bought a pile of romance novels. Just then, Carmelo received orders to head to the north. Not only did he not expect to leave immediately, but he had also fallen asleep in the meeting. He was instructed to defy orders and secretly follow the commander on his next trip to the north. And he was to get close to someone close to the commander and use that connection. They had infused more power into the stone that had been purified by the commander's inner power, which would be fatal to an ordinary person. Most importantly, Carmelo had to remember not to let Rachel touch it, because that thing was very similar to her flames. If the woman the commander met was worthy of being his life partner, she would absorb all the power the moment she touched the stone. But if an ordinary person touched it, they would obviously be unable to withstand it and be burned to a crisp. We really had no other choice, especially with both the young lady and the commander gone for so long. Thinking of those despicable people, Rachel couldn't believe they would use her brother's power to test her sister-in-law. Most importantly, she didn't want the person who had been so kind to her to be in danger. Just then, the girl told her brother to give her the stone, thinking something so dangerous should be in her keeping. As the young lady was about to touch the stone, Carmelo was about to go crazy. He couldn't let the stone's fire attribute clash with her flames. The young lady would be done for. Rachel kept trying to snatch it, and if she kept it up, she would succeed sooner or later. Swallowing the stone was his only option at that moment. Seeing this idiotic move, Rachel was horrified and lunged at him, screaming for him to spit it out. She insisted Carmelo's life was in danger, but the truth was she would be in more danger if she got the stone. The situation was getting out of control. If he didn't spit it out, Rachel was going to get physical. Despite his fear of being burned, the chameleon gritted his teeth and swallowed the stone. Just then, some kind of demonic power erupted from within him. His eyes rolled back, and only Rachel knew what was happening. Now a complete monster, Carmelo begged the young lady to save him. The girl now understood that he had swallowed a stone with her brother's power, and he was a dead man. A fear she had long forgotten burned in her heart again. The nightmare brought back bad memories from her time in the north, and she was afraid it would all end like this. Just as fear was about to paralyze her, she saw Zion, with tears in his eyes, holding her tightly. The child wanted to protect his sister. He was trembling with fear, but still tried to shield her. Calming down, Rachel realized that if she gave in to her fear, Zion would be in danger too. The dragon girl gritted her teeth, unleashed her fiery power, and warned him it would sting a little. Suddenly, Carmelo felt a violent jolt and flew backward, hit right in the forehead. My God, it was a frozen stone. Someone wanted to ruin their peaceful life, and she had come all the way into the woods for this. The wolf girl rushed in like the north wind, roaring at him, "Don't touch my children." Eva was so furious that this chameleon dared to touch them that Noel couldn't hold her back. She was ready to show this bastard who he was messing with, but Rachel tried to tell her it was too risky. Unexpectedly, Carmelo's body was abnormally hot. The heat was so intense that Eva couldn't even grab him. It burned through her hand in an instant. Luckily, she wasn't hurt, just her clothes were a little scorched. Noel was shocked by Carmelo's appearance, especially since he looked like he had eaten a redstone. What just happened had scared Rachel to death. She thought they were all in danger. Considering where Carmelo came from, Noel guessed it must be a stone related to his power. Seeing Carmelo bursting with energy like that, it was clear it contained a huge amount of her energy. The officer's life was on the line, but Sir Rainier was helpless, realizing his own abilities would only make things worse. In that crazy moment, despite the risks, Eva immediately rushed to the injured man to help him. She couldn't just watch him die when she could use her magic to draw the heat out of him. Noel watched her insane magic skills, dumbfounded, unable to comprehend how she did it. The next thing Carmelo knew, he woke up in a strange room, thinking he was dead. A stunningly beautiful woman with blue eyes walked in, pulling him back to reality. As she touched his forehead to check for a fever, she saw he was awake. She looked like an angel. She gave the children some medicine, something to clear the last of the heat from their bodies. It was then that Carmelo knew he was in heaven, a place with no officers and no work problems. It wasn't until Noel walked in with some plants that the kid finally saw the officer. After getting the best herbs, Eva went to brew them into a medicinal soup. In that instant, fury ignited in the dragon's eyes. He wanted to hear this bastard's excuse. The commander wouldn't blame them for just trying to bring him back. They meant well. He completely understood Carmelo's situation, which was why he did it. But the real problem was that Eva and the children were almost hurt because of it. Feeling a heavy sense of guilt, Carmelo fell to his knees, ready to atone with his life. Seeing this nightmarish scene, Eva's heart sank. She couldn't understand it all. Noel knew he had to be on his best behavior and not let this incident ruin everything. To cover it up, he told the kid to lie back down, saying he was running a fever. It felt strange for the commander to be so gentle and considerate, like he was putting on an act. After all that, Carmelo almost forgot it was the angelic girl who had saved his life. But ice magic was a specialty of the wolf tribe, so it was very obvious. Since the girl had cooled him down with her magic, the kid guessed she was a wolf. For some reason, this always happened whenever our heroine met someone from the south. The children rushed into the room to see their brother, saving Eva from that awkward conversation. Zion quickly diffused the tension, but then Rachel suddenly needed a hug. If Noel couldn't handle it himself, she was going to step in. No more messing around. The girl immediately felt better, but then said her brother needed to cool down too and suggested a group hug. Seeing them so close, Carmelo decided to find out what was really going on between them. According to Eva, it was their circumstances that brought them together, nothing more. Despite what she said, Rachel revealed the truth. Eva was actually her sister-in-law and her brother's friend. The heroine couldn't believe Rachel was now calling her Noel's friend. She thought she must have misheard. To be called his friend, there must be something between her and Noel. Meanwhile, Eva tried to convince herself that nothing was going on. After concentrating, she thought Rachel might have just meant a friendly relationship. There were cultural differences between the North and the South. The same word could have different meanings. She heard that in the West, tigers eat grass because it's especially good for the immune system. Understandable. So Eva needed to clear things up with her sister-in-law. Hearing that his sister was now Noel's friend, Zion decided to call Carmelo his friend too. From the way the young lady treated them, the chameleon realized they couldn't possibly be wolves. Although it was a very rude question, Noel wasn't surprised at all. Just by looking at him, you couldn't tell anything was wrong. He didn't know why Rachel called the girl his friend, and she even asked him for another hug. After the guy felt better, he didn't want to cause any more trouble and decided to leave. As he left, Eva told him to take care of himself. He could drop by if he was in the neighborhood again. There probably wouldn't be a next time. The girl had already met a whole bunch of Southerners in such a short time. She wasn't sure if the word friend meant the same thing in the South as it did in the North. Still, purely out of curiosity, she wanted to know if Northerners and Southerners used words the same way. Before Noel could answer, they realized Rachel had run off somewhere. Noel followed, guessing she had gone to see Carmelo off, while Eva decided to check on the house and yard. Honestly, it's a bit suspicious that the commander suddenly has a friend, isn't it? Basically, this girl is going to be his future wife. You know what I mean? Everything is about to change, and I have to hurry back and tell the guys in the South. They have to know that the commander is bringing his future wife and her brother to the South. Suddenly, a bright light illuminated Carmelo, and a phoenix nearly landed on his head. He barely remembered it was the mistress's bird when the dragon's siblings rushed out of the woods. After some thought, Noel decided to find out what this guy thought of Eva's power. The chameleon was convinced she had the most insane ice power he had ever seen. Still, Noel felt they needed to do some prep work before bringing her to the South. A dragon showing up in the North would scare everyone to death, and they would flee to the South purely out of fear. So Carmelo decided to go talk to the people and make sure they gave this benefactor and her brother the welcome they deserved. One more thing. What would the Southerners think if Eva and her brother showed up as mages? They might mistake them for wolves, since many mages were wolves. The chameleon was tasked with explaining to them that mages were not wolves to avoid any misunderstanding. The commander had full faith he could handle it, and Carmelo promised to do his best. The news spread quickly that there was someone who could control the commander's inner fire. The officer couldn't believe there was an ice mage he had never heard of. He was determined to find out where this guy lived and had to see if he was even human. The whole thing was too strange, so he decided to head to the South. As flames engulfed the South and everyone was steeped in grief, On the day the old lord and lady died from the current lord's out-of-control power, that kid swore he would do anything for their lord and the young lady. To help him, he gathered the best ice mages from all over the world and even made a dirty deal with a half-wolf. It all turned out to be for nothing, and now a mage who could control the lord's power had appeared. This had to be a trick by those damn wolves, which the legends had warned about. Feeling the weight of responsibility, the officer believed it was his duty to protect the commander. Meanwhile, there was nothing to be found in the library. Usually, Eva could find something here, and it would be nice if there were decent children's books. But since they had downsized the collection, Eva couldn't even find anything for herself. She was looking for books about the human world, hoping to find one that could take her there. Since Noel was the leader of the South, she figured he would have a personal library. Honestly, the commander wasn't sure. He had never actually asked about it. Then Eva decided to ask again about words that change meaning depending on the situation. It turned out that in the South, the word friend was used to refer to your brother's wife. But when Rachel called Eva that, Noel and Carmelo had no reaction. The commander, looking confused, said that friend pretty much meant that. Honestly, the girl was completely right when Rachel called her that. But since no one said anything, Noel felt bad that she was put in such an awkward position. He wanted to correct his sister, but couldn't even get the words out. Hoping those words would come true, the guy was sure Eva had noticed he wasn't very good at controlling his power. As a result, he had put her and his people in danger and caused a great disaster in the South. It all stemmed from his parents, as he was born with only one heart. As far as Eva knew, dragons were usually born with two hearts and could control their powers. But Noel brought pain to those he loved, and the more he lost what he cared about, the more fear consumed him. He couldn't stop thinking that it might happen again. Many had tried to help him, but to no avail, so the only solution they could come up with was to force Noel to wear various limiters. The stronger he got, the harder it was to control the situation. Then he met her, and when they touched, a crazy power surged through his body. No one could control his power like Eva could. So, yes, it was a bit childish, but all he could do was ask her to stroke his hair because that was the only time he could feel the coldness he had barely ever experienced. That's why Noel didn't object when Rachel called the girl his girlfriend. But what he really wanted to say, he couldn't bring himself to how much he loved her embrace. Now our heroine understood, which was great. The power she thought was useless could actually help Noel. But, hey, she was just a side character who would soon disappear from the story. For her own sake, for everything they had done, and for what Zion had suffered, she couldn't help Noel just because of a trivial crush. Now that Rachel had her memories back, she could go to the South. Eva, she had to find a way to get to the human world before things got trickier. And as for Noel, all she could do was hope he would find his destined one. Finally arriving in the North, the guy from the South couldn't help but notice it was freezing cold. He was too careless, not even considering the weather before coming to the North. He was penniless and couldn't even afford basic warm gear. The guys in the North wouldn't even give him credit, and those damn Wolf Clan members kicked him out without even giving him a coat. It was too cold here to even start a fire. Anyway, the Wolf Clan could never win a dragon's heart. The old man couldn't believe the captain's soulmate lived in a hellhole like this. She must have pulled some trick. A child appeared out of nowhere and walked up to ask if he was cold, which completely surprised him. The boy thought the guy was about to freeze, but the old man just shooed the meddlesome little wolf cub away. Seeing his runny nose, Zion didn't hesitate to give him his warm scarf, even though the old man was still acting tough and saying he wasn't cold. That scarf was really warm. Thinking he'd have to return it anyway, he agreed to borrow it for a while. It turned out the kid had gotten lost while chasing a kitten. In the old man's eyes, the kid gave him the scarf just to get him to help find his sister. But Zion insisted that wasn't the case because the old man had also helped him when he was in trouble. His sister said that if you're kind to people, kindness will be returned. The old man never expected to meet such a kind child. In the North, it didn't matter if the other person was from the Wolf Clan. This boss gave his word of honor that he wouldn't leave him until they found his sister. Turns out it was much easier than expected. His sister appeared out of thin air. Eve was angry, reminding her brother not to wander off alone. The old man finally met the kid's sister, but to his surprise, the captain and Rachel were also there. So, she must be the partner Carmel mentioned. A graceful and kind girl like her must be human. This older man felt guilty for his earlier suspicions. He thanked the child for his kindness, knowing that good deeds are rewarded. The old man no longer needed the scarf. He wasn't cold anymore. On second thought, he didn't seem that weird. At least, they'd rather believe so. Speaking of luck, Eva thought she'd be looking for Zion all day and wouldn't even be able to buy food. Thank goodness. The kids had really grown up and were a big help. What Noel had said this morning kept echoing in Ava's mind. She struggled, wondering if ignoring his words was the right choice. As she was lost in thought, she accidentally stumbled upon a brutal assault. In an alley, a poor Wolf Clan girl insisted she hadn't been seen by anyone or caused any trouble. From their conversation, she overheard that half-breeds were being arrested and interrogated. They accused the Wolf Clan girl of sneaking into the human world and damaging the Wolf Clan's reputation. He was furious at the thought of those damn humans looking down on them. The captain ordered him to stop, saying he wanted to ask the girl a question. He offered her a deal. If she cooperated, she and her younger brother would be safe. Captain Ed wanted to know if she knew a pair of siblings with white hair and blue eyes. After escaping, Eva hoped she had misheard, hoping they weren't looking for her and Zion. Judging by the fact that they needed someone with blue eyes and white hair, it was likely them they were looking for. So she hastily decided to leave the north, but she knew nothing about the channels for illegal immigration. Without a permit, they couldn't just move somewhere else. Suddenly, Noel and his younger siblings walked in. Eva had arrived before them. She said she was just looking for something and asked them to wait in the hall. But the kid saw the books about the human world behind her and immediately understood she wanted to move. Rachel said they all knew she wanted to find a way to go, so there was no need to hide it. The girl understood her sister's difficulties living in a foreign land and offered to go with her. Ruby's memory of being with her brother was a bit fuzzy, so she wasn't sure if she remembered everything correctly. If she remembered right, her brother once said there was a passage to the human world in the south. They signed an agreement and built it to make it easier for people to travel back and forth. Rumor has it there's also a secret passage for smuggling people across. But Eva wasn't sure if the South was safe for them. Their secret wasn't out yet, but it was only a matter of time. Noel held the girl's hand and asked if she would grant him the honor of escorting her and Zion to the human world. He couldn't let people spread rumors that they were from the Wolf Clan, just because they came from the north. Noel saw an opportunity and decided to take Rachel back to the south. For him, this was enough for now. On the way, Rachel suggested her sister stay at their home. She wanted to spend as much time with her and Zion as possible. Ava had also been wanting to see her, and this might be her last chance. If she kept hesitating, their only way to the south would close. They would see each other less and less, eventually becoming strangers. Children forget things quickly, especially promises. Rachel's real plan was to ensure Eve would never reach the human world. She planned to make the girl one of her own. Soon, Eve wouldn't be able to go to the human world because Rachel was going to make her fall in love with the South and forget everything else. That night, the Wolf Clan captain got word that they had brought the person he wanted to see. Ed finally met the herb dealer who had been buying immunity herbs from the doctor. The captain was pleased with the doctor's kindness and dedication, so he wanted to give him a chance to start over. But this bastard wasn't a doctor at all. He was just a dealer. That being the case, Ed ordered him to tell him everything he knew about the person who supplied the herbs. The person always wore a mask, so he never got a clear look at their face. This person was thin, possibly a girl, deliberately lowering her voice. She had white hair, which matched what a merchant had said. The person the captain was hunting was suspected of helping illegal immigrants enter the human world, and this distributor was one of the people helping her carry out her plan. Even if this kid said he didn't know, ignorance is no excuse here. Now, Ed could finally help her, that beautiful white-haired girl named Eva. Before moving, he needed to handle some documents, so Noel would be returning to the south for a few days. That night, under the bright moonlight, Eva saw Noel's true face for the first time, and it was breathtaking. At that time, she had been certain that as long as she could leave the north, they could live freely. If Rachel got home safely, they wouldn't need to meet again, which meant he wouldn't take them to the human world either. The first time she thought of this, Eve felt an unprecedented sense of relief. She felt foolish, unable to even take care of herself, let alone others. But she believed that if Noel met his soulmate, he would no longer need her power. Before reaching the human world, Eve decided she would help him as long as he asked. This would be her way of repaying him for everything he had done for them. Today, the Wolf Clan captain was heading out to investigate his first case since taking office. He had to do his duty without any slack. Since they were going out anyway, Ed suggested they check out that place. Just then, a young man rushed into the hall. The captain had just received an urgent message. Okay, this was extremely urgent. Turns out, we received a letter from the Dragon clan. Captain Noel and his crew will arrive in the northern forest in 3 days and have informed us of their location in advance. Since the southern captain doesn't plan to stay long, he doesn't want any fancy ceremonies. The adjutant thought this communication was completely disrespectful to the North. What's more suspicious is that he specifically requested we not hold a welcome party for him. Edmmond desperately wanted to know what the hell this damn dragon was up to, so he decided to go see for himself. The children quickly packed their bags and were now eager to go play. We don't need much to start with. We can buy whatever we need in the human world. Hearing the children's screams, Eva rushed outside and found something was wrong. A large group of bloodthirsty dragons were tearing down houses, and no one knew what was happening. Noel broke through the crowd of his men and appeared to pick up his girl. Seeing him, Eve's first thought was, what's with all this fuss? The captain's most trusted men would get them to the south as soon as possible, even with a small crew. Noel guessed she was tired from packing and told her to rest, leaving the rest for him to handle. Zion had already guessed they were leaving the north, and surprisingly, he had no attachment to it. As long as his sister was by his side, he didn't care where he was. Eve was the same. As long as she was with him, she would go anywhere. Soon they would go to a warm place they would both love. One of the dragons had only ever lived in the south, so he didn't know what the north was like, but the sight looked amazing. Suddenly, Eve overheard some people becoming suspicious of her and her brother for living alone in the forest. For some reason, these southerners were calling her the captain's soulmate and thought this was a great place for a wedding. Unsure where the rumor started, the girl wanted to set the record straight. Just then, the man appeared. Everyone knew the southern captain didn't want any welcome party, and he was curious what urgent matter made Captain Noel rush so much. Now Edmmond understood that whoever was running the illegal immigration was hiding in the south. It was obvious Noel hated the Wolf clan, as he had given them the wrong coordinates to wait at. As Ed expected, the southern captain was planning to squeeze information about the Wolf clan out of the northerners. But the most important thing now was the white-haired girl. The famous Eva. No doubt, it was definitely her. The Wolf clan captain had finally found her. Sensing danger, Noel quietly circled behind and grabbed Edmund's arm tightly. A flash of fear crossed Zion's eyes. They had been living in seclusion all this time, just as the captain had asked. Eve now only hoped these people would finally leave them alone. It was Ed who told them to get as far away as possible, and they did. As he expected, it was Eve and her brother who were trying to smuggle themselves into the human world. The real reason the northern captain had been looking for her was because he missed her. It was obvious these southerners had agreed to help them cross illegally in exchange for some kind of favor. If she left, just because of some misunderstanding between them, Ed had changed and was ready to accept Eve. Hearing this, Noel felt there must be some misunderstanding. Because the truth is, Eve isn't going to the human world. She's going to the south with him. Regardless of whether Ed had changed or how strong he had become, Eve just didn't want to stay here anymore. Come to think of it, if Ed were in her shoes, he wouldn't want to live under these restrictions either. What she didn't know was that he had gone for that position because he knew she had suffered greatly from racial discrimination. In that moment, she panicked, afraid everyone would find out she and her brother were half-breeds. Rachel appeared out of nowhere, called Carmel over, and pointed to her sister. Seeing the captain's partner, the man excitedly told her the things were loaded and it was time to go. Hearing everyone call Eve the southern captain's lifelong partner, Edmmond forgot to breathe. To end this stupid argument once and for all, the girl admitted she was Noel's partner. It was the only way to get that wolf to stop bothering them. She planned to explain everything to Noel once they reached the south. She was very sorry for troubling him again, but he completely understood. Noel released his magic bird into the air, finally opening the path to a brighter future. It was time to hit the road to the south. It seemed today would be a day for the history books. But Ed lost his mind, telling Eve to speak the truth and asking if she was being threatened. He insisted this man was dangerous. He was convinced she had no idea what terrible things dragons were capable of. However, The one who made her life miserable was Edmmond. He was far more terrifying. Watching the great dragon soar through the sky, cutting through the northern heavens, the captain knew he couldn't protect Eve. His father, the former northern captain, had taught him that half-breeds were not of the wolf clan. Everyone around him looked down on them, so Ed did too. But when he first met Eve's eyes, he didn't know she was a despised half-breed. Seeing how beautiful she was, he couldn't help but be captivated. At that time, the kid was too young to realize he had fallen in love with her. He was tormented by guilt for having feelings for a half-breed, and he was scared because everyone was watching him. Even so, Edmmond had no excuse for what he did. He had lived with regret ever since. On his way home, he decided he must become captain as soon as possible, so no one could hurt Eve again. He swore to ensure she would always be safe, always under his protection. Since he couldn't catch something that flies, the northern captain decided to return. He was no help here, so he ordered his men to pick a few agile subordinates and secretly follow the wolf clan. Ed knew Ava had tainted blood, which meant she could lose control. No one knew if those brutal dragons would exploit her weakness to brainwash her. Alone, all Ed could do was to keep searching for her, never giving up. The journey south was filled with complex emotions. This was a long-awaited day. Eva had never even dreamed she would willingly go to the land of dragons. Just as they were about to arrive, Noel suddenly suggested she look down, saying the view was beautiful. If she didn't mind, he wanted to hold her hand. He wasn't trying to take advantage of her, just wanted to show her something beautiful. The captain said this, hoping she would only have happy memories before she went to the human world, because she trusted him. Noel was a good person, but the problem was, would he still be like this if he found out Eve was a half-breed? He hadn't suspected anything so far, but the risk of him finding out the truth remained. Suddenly, Rachel interrupted, telling her sister that what she was thinking wouldn't happen. The child noticed she was preoccupied and guessed she was afraid of falling. For a moment, Eve thought the child could read minds, but Rachel had actually been supporting her all along. Now, they had a chance to enjoy the sky together. Mom used to say when she was little that dragons weren't as scary as they seemed. But since she never actually saw a dragon, I guess she didn't know anything. Great-great-grandmother used to say they were kind of long time ago. The story was passed down that dragons were actually quite gentle creatures. So Mom always told me that if I met a dragon, I had to be extra nice to it. That way, I'd definitely have a chance to make them like me. After arriving in the south, which felt like the tropics, the wolves thought they had arrived in heaven. This was not at all what she imagined the south to be like. She couldn't believe there were so many blooming flowers. Zion saw a butterfly for the first time and learned its name, having only seen it in books before. While playing with the little winged thing, the boy accidentally bumped into its owner and immediately apologized. Your uncle hopes the child is all right. Last time he didn't get to introduce himself properly. Hopper is the captain's man. Though it's late, he insisted I convey his thanks for your help. In the novel, he was a slick character who hated the wolf clan. The heroine always felt very uneasy around him. Hopper said if they needed anything, they should tell him without hesitation. He didn't expect the girl to ask for a scroll book, the kind that could only be found in the South. He said they had a scroll library, but it would be a bit difficult to get in right now. Hopper first had her take the antidote and change into some light southern clothing. Then, she could look around while the department head dealt with his mountain of work. Just then, Eve felt at home, all because she was the commander's partner. Suddenly, a servant asked what she needed the library for and promised to help her pick out some books. So, just as the girl said, she couldn't find any books about the South and the North. That's why she came here, and now she was eager to read The Legend of the Dragons to help Noel. Hopper said that for the captain, but just being here was enough, but knowing the story would be a plus. Eve knew very well in her heart that if she was exposed, Zion would be done for, and so would Noel. Unfortunately, she wasn't good at controlling her emotions. It seemed she was a lost cause. The girl started first with the history of the South Rehigh continent. The story says that God rules the heavens, death rules the world, and humans manage the earth. The dragons, with their near-eternal lives, descended upon this world and couldn't adapt at first. But with their wisdom and the help of the red dragons, they managed to settle safely in the south. But soon, the number of conflict between the mountain dragons began to increase, and the beastmen began to suffer because of it. So they asked the strongest red dragon to be their leader. He was kind-hearted, so he agreed. Meanwhile, some humans and wolves mistakenly thought the dragons had taken over the south. The leader was injured by a human's trick, and a wolf took the opportunity to steal his heart. The first dragon couldn't handle all that power with just one heart, and the situation was very bad. So the dragon clan went to the north to retrieve the heart, but they couldn't find the wolf. In the end, the dragon leader died, and a war broke out between the north and south. The war ended with the intervention of the western mermaid leader and the eastern lion leader. It said that after the wolf sold the heart to a dragon hunter, a second war broke out between the south and the human world. Because of all this, the human world and the beastman world fell apart, and it became impossible to restore good relations between the north and south. Since then, the location of the heart has remained a mystery. After reading the story, Eve found no clues. She kept wondering if the Eve in the novel affected Noel's fever, because she was the wolf who had the heart. Impossible, otherwise she wouldn't have died in Rachel's flames. Dragon fire can't burn through something as powerful as Noel's heart. The more she thought, the more confused she got. Suddenly, Rachel's voice broke the silence. She said Zion was asleep. It had been a busy day. It seemed Eve was tired too, falling asleep right at the table, which was no wonder, as she had so much on her mind. The girl thought she should carry her sister to her room, or better yet, the honeymoon suite. Once, when she was a child, she was gathering herbs in the forest, and her father showed her a flower created by magic. Eve started to complain, saying she was freezing and they should hurry up and finish gathering the herbs. It was snowing heavily in the forest, and they had to gather herbs while dreaming of going back soon. But then the snow stopped, and the girl guessed her dad must have some kind of power. Afterwards, Eve woke up to find herself in completely different clothes. She was about to run out to find the children as soon as possible, but Noel told her they were still asleep in his room. He sincerely hoped the girl had gotten a good rest. Although the lady wanted to leave right away, the captain felt it was perfectly normal for her to be here. I mean, everyone in the palace thought Eve was his woman, and he hadn't arranged a separate room for her. Not wanting to disturb anyone, the guy was about to leave, but he suddenly felt unwell and almost fell flat on the floor. He just had a slight fever, and Eve had promised to help him anytime she could. The captain hadn't rested since they arrived in the south. He had probably been working nonstop. He was exhausted today, but he was happy to have his sweetheart by his side. Seeing his face all red, she thought he had a fever. In fact, the guy's face wasn't red because of his temperature, not at all. It was because he had just gathered the courage to ask Eva if he could hug her. Noel was already starting to ramble. He only asked for a brief hug. Maybe a hug would calm him down. It's just a hug, she tried to tell herself. Pressed against his chest, she heard his heart pounding like a drum and forgot to breathe for a moment. Eva was afraid to admit she was the cause of his anxiety, tormenting herself with all sorts of guesses. She gathered her courage and decided to ask him directly. It might backfire, but she needed to know. She asked Noel if he was curious why she didn't have a beast form, yet still lived in the north. Doubts gnawed at her. Would he still like her when he found out she was a half-breed? Seeing the surprise in his eyes, Eve immediately regretted asking that question. She brushed it off, saying she was just tired and talking nonsense, then lost her balance and suddenly fell in her boyfriend's arms. She had never thought about what to do in this situation, so she just apologized and said she would get up, but Noel held her even tighter. He was genuinely curious and wanted to know everything about her. What Eve was like as a child, her favorite food, the thoughts in her head. Perhaps there were things she didn't want to share, so he didn't plan on forcing her. But no matter what, Noel's feelings for her wouldn't change. This reminded Eve of her childhood when she loved spending time with her dad. They used to make ice flowers to play with. Her dad was human, but she felt he could control ice. He wasn't always successful. Sometimes the spell would fail and the snow would melt. As she rambled on about learning about medicinal herbs, because of her father, Noel just smiled relaxedly until he drifted off to sleep. Although Eve couldn't muster the courage to admit she was a half-blood, his smile seemed to say he would accept her no matter what. Julia Carrat, with her keen hearing and love for reading, was the perfect candidate. Ruby chose her to be the sister's handmaiden and had Phoenix inform the servants. Late at night, Zion stumbled into the room, sleepy-eyed, wanting to see why the girl wasn't asleep yet. The first thing Rachel noticed was that he had ears and a tail. It was so warm in here that he had relaxed, but he really needed to hide them. Zion suddenly remembered his sister. According to Ruby, she was already in her own room, and now the boy had his own room too. Although they always slept together, he now had to learn to sleep alone. In fact, the child also wanted to grow up and become as strong and sturdy as his brother. In that case, he had to follow the rules, starting with not sneaking into his sister's room at night. Hearing this, Zion burst into tears. He couldn't sleep alone. He was afraid of the dark. Knowing this, Ruby told him to go to her room, which was just across the hall, whenever he got scared. It turned out the little guy was a total coward after all his talk about protecting his sister. In her eyes, he was just a silly boy, but at least he knew how to write. The next morning, when Eve woke up, she found herself face to face with the Southern Chief. Extremely embarrassed, she leaped out of bed, but Noel was already awake. He just wanted to take up a little more of her time in the morning. It seemed the temperature was rising. Because she had fallen asleep yesterday, she had to hold him, but she'd completely forgotten she was in his bed. Holding Eve was the best feeling, Noel said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The door was suddenly thrown open, and the new handmaiden walked in, apologizing for disturbing them and hoping they would get along well. The girl introduced herself as Julia Carrat. As the new handmaiden, because she was from the rabbit tribe, her hearing was keener than most, as the mistress may have already told you. Julia was meeting her mistress for the first time today, so she was a little nervous. So when she overheard their conversation, a very inappropriate image popped into her head. In any case, it was an honor to serve Eve, now that they had finally met. Before leaving, Noel offered to prepare something special for her, but she wasn't fully awake yet, so she wasn't hungry. Julia was completely captivated by the sweet couple. Soon, the table was filled with exquisite dishes. It was hard to believe this was just breakfast and not even lunch. She really enjoyed the food and even wanted to ask the chef for the recipes. He thought the bath bomb Noel had picked out was amazing. It was her first time using one. Smelling the enchanting fragrance, she realized the guy used cologne too. No wonder he always smelled so good. Thinking this, Eve's cheeks flushed as she just said, "It's too hot in here." In reality, she was thinking about last night. Noel sensed it and wanted to know what happened. He remembered she was incredibly cute and charming, but she insisted she didn't mean it that way. It was something else entirely. She just liked his scent. Their awkward conversation was interrupted by a loud shout from her brother, Zion, who burst into the dining room. The little guy was super proud of himself. He had slept alone tonight, and thankfully, disaster was averted. Zion was a big boy now. Following close behind, two excited guys rushed into the dining room. Those adorable kids were his buddies now, and they could barely keep up with the little speedster. When Ruby rushed in, out of breath, she gasped, realizing how fast the kid was. Or rather, she was too slow to catch him. Eve couldn't just ignore her. Her little girl was growing up too. Rachel thought she would have nightmares without her sister, but she slept like a baby last night. This carefree sight warmed Noel's heart. Everyone was having a great time. It was the first time he had seen Rachel laugh like that since their parents left. Noel thanked Eve and Zion. They were the ones who finally allowed warmth and love to take root in Rachel's heart. This girl made everyone around her happy. What Noel used to want no longer mattered to him. He dreamed of Eve becoming his wife, the only one to be with him until the very end. His eternal love. Yet, just as doubt crept in, the chief felt a woman's hands on him. This girl, who plunged him into fear and suspicion, dared to suggest that Eve was lying. In a panic, he whipped around, only to see the servant behind him. He couldn't shake the feeling. He seemed to have heard that voice somewhere before. After the banquet, the new handmaiden started spreading rumors that he had almost died. She thought that was why the chief was smiling so happily today. Although some didn't believe it, she swore he handled it quite well. This morning, Julia had accidentally walked in on the mistress and master holding each other tightly. Another handmaiden thought that no matter how curious you are, you can't eavesdrop on something like that. Julia thought it was good news, but the mistress thought handmaidens like her were too naive. The chef, Maria, couldn't even imagine what kind of person could charm a chief so completely. Besides, she reminded her, handmaidens weren't allowed in the kitchen, and it was time for the girls to do the dishes. It was really strange. Julia wasn't usually this talkative. Since there was a lot of food left over, Maria figured the Northerners were just picky eaters. Suddenly, she got a message that someone was waiting for her outside. Hooper wanted to see her. Seeing him outside, the lady thought he was there to praise her, and she was right. Her food was a big hit with the guests, but Maria still didn't understand why they hadn't finished everything. It turned out the girl had been too tired for the past few days, so she didn't have much of an appetite yet. When she heard the mistress wanted to come to the kitchen to learn how to cook, Maria felt like she had hit the jackpot. Meanwhile, they were only half a day's journey from the royal palace. This meant Edmond would soon find her, his Eve. It was a warm and sunny afternoon, but Noel was still busy as ever. Zion had made some new friends, and Rachel liked Eve more than she had expected. The heroine had feared they would meet as they did in the novel, but now she just hoped the girl could be happy. Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf weren't like that in the story. Maybe they would become good friends. The aroma from the kitchen was everywhere. Julia said they were having turkey for dinner tonight. Eve hoped every day could be this peaceful, but on that fateful day, she suddenly ran into someone who had shaped her childhood. Seeing Edmond appear before her, the girl knew that peaceful days were just a daydream. Feeling his touch, Eve wondered what he was doing and why he had come to the south. Just then, an angry dragonkin girl stepped between them, manipulating flames and ordering him to stay away from her sister. So this was the southern chief's sister, the one who was chasing after Edmond. He found it both pathetic and laughable that they still thought he could bring Eve to her senses. Just as Rachel was trying to figure out what that meant, the northern chief vanished. He reappeared behind her, and right in front of everyone, something terrible happened. An invisible force sent Rachel flying, and she fell like a stone. Edmond figured that even if she was a dragonkin, she was still a child and not necessarily involved in the rebellion. To allay the crowd's fears, he said she had just passed out and would be fine. But what shocked Eve the most was his suggestion that she go back, because the south was too dangerous. In desperation, Julia suddenly grabbed the chief's throat, telling them to get out. Her action forced the first mate to shove her aside, and she screamed from the impact. Just then, Edmond told the kid to clean up this mess while he took Eve with him. In that instant, a fire ignited in the wolfkin girl's eyes like never before. She was ready to kill this bastard. Thinking Eve had been completely deceived, the chief told her to hang on, that it was time to say goodbye. At this decisive moment, the furious wolfkin girl grabbed his throat, saying that no one had deceived her. She stared into the eyes of this scum, entwining his neck with ice magic. Convinced he had no soul, a violent, all-consuming power enveloped them, exploding outward like a nuclear bomb. As the dust settled, the southern chief's subordinates couldn't figure out what had just happened. As the mist slowly cleared, a confused Eve emerged from the rolling clouds. She had created something amazing with her own hands, but it wasn't clear what exactly had happened here. The northern chief woke up to find himself bound hand and foot in a room he didn't recognize. Eve wanted to talk to him alone, so she asked all his men to leave. She had some things to figure out. As for why everything happened the way it did, the girl didn't even try to explain it to him. She had tried to kill him with her ice magic, but something had stopped her. More specifically, Ed's ability. It seemed she had encountered it before. Something similar. Now that it was all over, it didn't matter anymore. First, she needed to deal with him. This was the first time they had really talked like this. Eve usually avoided him. When she tried to find out why Ed was chasing her or hated her, he said it wasn't like that at all. He sincerely apologized for what he did as a child, and he understood why she blamed him. Edmond just hoped she would give him a chance, but Eve didn't want it, nor did she need it. Even if all the wolfkin begged for her forgiveness, she would not return to the north. That place was hell for her. Because Eve was a half-wolf, no one bothered to search for her missing father, and her mother had to give birth without a doctor. Ed still hoped to get her back, vowing to find everyone who had wronged her and bring them before her, including himself. Without a doubt, he would do anything for this she-wolf. Now, Eve's younger brother didn't remember their parents, so he always asked if they had abandoned them. The girl would tell him they were very excited about his birth, but they had to go work far away, and Zion just had to sleep for 1,000 nights. Then they would come back. But after that, he stopped asking about their parents. Eve thought he was counting the nights, but that wasn't the case. Zion had figured it out on his own, realizing they were no longer in this world, a fact that broke Eve's heart. Since Edmond was willing to do anything for her, she asked him to bring her parents back to life. All she wanted was for her brother to be able to meet them. Ed was speechless. He felt terrible, but it was too late. Eve told him she wasn't saying all this to be forgiven. She told the chief to never appear before her again and to forget her. If Ed had a shred of remorse, he should erase that half-wolf she-devil from his memory forever. With a heavy heart, our girl left the room, and then she saw Rachel outside. She couldn't believe the little one was awake and started firing off questions about how she was feeling. Surprisingly, Rachel didn't say much. only that she was fine. Just then, a piercing scream rang out, and when Julia learned that her mistress had been alone with that wolfman, she nearly fell apart. The handmaiden wanted to know if he had hurt her, but Eve told her to stop fussing. A moment later, our heroine wanted to speak with her sister again, but she had vanished without a trace. So the situation was resolved quickly. But when the Dragonkin learned what had happened, they were furious. They had every reason to wipe the North off the map, but Rachel stopped them. Before they could catch him, Ed had disappeared, leaving only a handwritten letter of apology. Now that things were settled, Eve didn't want any more involvement, but she didn't understand why Rachel had stopped the Dragonkin. She wanted to carefully ask the child about it, to see if she was still undercover, but Rachel was acting strangely in the hallway. The mistress ran into the handmaiden Julia, who had bandaged herself up and decided to get back to work. The little one had been visiting them a lot lately. She had been feeding him. He might be a beast man, but the handmaiden didn't know how to talk to him. If he was a beast man, he was just a little one. She begged Eve not to tell anyone, afraid they would kick her out on the spot. Eve just figured the girl was tired of the monotonous daily routine, or was just homesick. Julia suddenly took off running, telling her mistress to wait a moment. A moment later, she returned with supplies, and even a bottle of particularly expensive wine. She felt that when you think too much, sometimes you just have to forget it, and drinking was the best way to do that. That night, Noel was inspecting the scene, but he couldn't find any trace of magic. But he had heard that Eve took down the northern chief. Even though everyone knew it was difficult for a half-blood to fight a pure-blood wolfkin. Moreover, no traces of magic were left at the scene, as if they had completely vanished. Even though her father was human, Eve could use ice magic, even if she wasn't always that good at it. Realizing something, the Southern Chief ordered Hooper to prepare a secret letter. The Master chose the Human King as the recipient. On his way back, Noel suddenly heard an urgent message. It was about his girl. It turned out that evening, the girls had picked the perfect spot to relax. Out of nowhere, Eve asked Julia what she would do if she knew she was going to die soon. Quite a heavy topic, right? Most people would probably hide in that situation, but this crazy girl, she would choose to fight back. She firmly believed that running from fate wasn't the answer, especially when you know what's coming. Julia would rather face her destiny head-on, so she wouldn't have any regrets. Although she might try to outsmart it first with a sneak attack and then a getaway. After saying that, Eve chugged her wine, which was quite bold. The handmaiden was there to help, but our girl couldn't stop thinking about how to escape her fate. She was worried about Noel and Rachel. If she and Zion left, those two would walk straight into the novel's tragic ending. Eve didn't think that was the best outcome. She wanted to secure a better future for them. That night, the girls didn't even expect to see Maria, who was still wondering where the wine had gone. Seeing that Julia was being well taken care of, Eve commented that the wine had an excellent aroma. Since the mistress knew her wine, Maria brought her something stronger, along with some snacks. And so, the word spread that Chief Ramirez's partner was dead drunk. Under the influence, she poured her heart out, saying she fell in love with a man, only to find out he was her brother who had been lost for 10 years. On top of that, she asked everyone to call her by her first name when drinking, since they were all friends. Then, lost in merriment and alcohol, Eve barely noticed Noel's arrival. Wanting to know who got her so drunk, the master was answered with another glass of wine. According to Maria, the mistress really liked the wine they brewed, so they were happy to share it with her. The servants desperately tried to stop her from drinking too much, but things got out of hand, saying that drinking too much was bad for her. Noel snatched the cup from her, holding her hand tightly in his. He felt so warm that she just melted into his chest. She hadn't had a drink in a long time, so it tasted especially delicious. Thinking she should probably go to sleep, the girl instantly transformed into a wolf in front of everyone. The servants were stunned, but Noel promised to later explain everything they had just seen. He also warned them that if anyone spilled the secret before he did, they were dead. In a blur, Eve thought she was lying on the grass, but Noel was laughing. He said they were in the bedroom. Because it was him, the girl immediately calmed down. Everything was all right now. After all, he was her husband. Although she knew he wasn't, really, because she had lied again and again, and if she hadn't, things might have been different. You know, this thought led Eve to confess she had a huge secret, as if she was finally ready to open the vault. She told him to come closer before dropping the bomb, that would completely shock Noel. The next morning, she woke up in the chief's room with no memory of how she got there. Seeing her awake, the chief brought her some fine, sobering tea. Noel looked exhausted, and Eve even wondered if she had done something crazy last night, but she couldn't remember a thing. Her memory just cut off. Since Noel was acting normal, she figured it was just regular fatigue and had nothing to do with her. When she asked for more tea, she clumsily knocked over the whole pot. A worried Eve immediately reached for the chief, but he jerked his hand back, saying he was just startled. The master left to have the handmaidens change the sheets. Also, he couldn't have lunch with her today because of a meeting. It seemed like he was avoiding Eve. For a whole week after that, she barely saw Noel, let alone spoke to him. She had gotten used to the South, or more accurately, the beastmen of the South had gotten used to her. From the looks on their faces, it was clear they probably hadn't found out her true identity yet. Wondering why Noel was avoiding her, Eve decided to ask her handmaiden what happened that day. Julia looked shocked and tried to insist that absolutely nothing had happened. Although the girl kept changing the subject, Eve ordered her to tell the whole truth. A week ago, the night before Eve woke up, Rachel found out that her little sister's true identity had been discovered. There was a reason they pretended not to know. They were waiting for her to tell them herself. They didn't care from the beginning that Eve was a wolfkin, because she had saved Rachel and Noel and supported them. But due to the Drunken's social status, no one dared to openly oppose her, so they were just biding their time. That night, a message from Hooper was suddenly delivered to everyone living in the castle. He ordered everyone who heard about the exposure of the chief's partner's true identity last night to keep their mouths shut, and all who witnessed it were to remain silent until the mistress revealed the truth herself. Anyone who violated this order had better be prepared to face the consequences. Gossip spread through the castle, with people afraid the mistress would go berserk and attack like a wolf. But Julia insisted that the mistress wasn't born that way on purpose, and besides, she had rejected the northern chief. In his handmaiden's eyes, Lady Eve was Lady Eve. Carmel also backed her up, saying he had never seen the boss so happy. The beastmen changed their minds and saw a lot of benefits from this alliance. Hooper had expected a lot of opposition, but everyone was crazy about the mistress. So he suggested they keep quiet until she was ready to open up completely. The Drunken's partner is a she-wolf. For an ordinary catkin like you, that's gold-tier information. At first, Noel was going to take her to the room she shared with Zion, but then her ears popped out, so now there was really no other choice. Before passing out, Eve had called the chief her partner. Of course, she didn't mean it like that, but Noel almost died of embarrassment that night. She decided to lift the veil a little, revealing her biggest secret. The alcohol had completely erased all her inhibitions. Noel barely had time to think about how to calm her down before Eve suddenly pressed her lips to his. In truth, she just wanted to give him a goodnight kiss. From that day on, every time the chief saw Eve, he was hit by a wave of uncontrollable emotion. He couldn't let that happen, unsure if he would hurt her, so he decided to keep his distance. But it wasn't long before he heard the news that the determined mistress wanted to talk. She knew Noel was busy, but she felt they had to have a conversation. Eve meant that he was avoiding her, but the chief insisted that wasn't the case at all. The girl decided to ask him directly if she had been too forward with him on the night she was drunk. Her memory was hazy, but she believed Noel wouldn't have treated her that way. The wolf girl prayed this wouldn't be a slap in the face, begging God for mercy. It seemed she had no idea what she was saying, barging in and demanding I do the same thing to her. Just then, Noel heard a voice in his head telling him to grab the girl and devour her. The voice told him to stop pretending to be Mr. Nice Guy and to swallow her whole, bones and all. The chief suddenly jumped up from his desk and told the girl to go back where she came from. He spoke with such difficulty that Eva thought something was troubling him. She thought he had a fever, but the moment she touched him, the furious commander lost control. An incredible rage burned in his eyes, and his face twisted into a beastly snarl. Realizing what had happened, Noel apologized and rushed out for some fresh air. Before long, news that the dragon's mate was a she-wolf reached the ears of the western chief, Reincarnated. The servant, knowing this was related to the dragon, made sure he was the first to find out. Being from the west, Miatun obviously had to tell her chief what she had overheard. She swore there was a minuscule chance the intelligence was false, but to be absolutely certain, Mia was heading to the south to dig up conclusive evidence. She promised to get ironclad proof that even Ryan would have to believe. The chief decided to let Mia have a free hand this time, sensing that this could be interesting. Soon, the cat girl finally arrived in the south, where the scenery was gorgeous. It was time to stop messing around and go earn some big money. She had been wandering for a long time today, but still hadn't seen any sign of the commander's partner. The girl noticed that the dragon clan grew a lot of apple trees, and they really treasured those things. A child's voice snapped her out of it. He was captivated by Mia's cute cat-like appearance. Mia recognized him as her target's younger brother, a hunter just like the wolves. It occurred to her that if she got on his good side, he would lead her to Eve, so she decided to play along. When she mentioned she was about to melt, it was clear Zion knew nothing about cats. The boy snatched up the poor kitten, determined to save her no matter what. Seeing her brother drag a kitten into the room, Eve ordered him to take it back to the garden. Mia hadn't expected to find the Southern commander's mate so easily. She thanked her little wolf brother and wondered what the lady was reading. It turned out Eve was reading legends about dragons, so there was a reason she wanted to get to the bottom of this. Mia guessed it was related to the conversation between Eve and the maid. The whole affair with the subordinate and the siblings from the north seemed much more complicated than she had thought. The more complex the intelligence, the more valuable it was. The cat girl planned to get closer to the lady to earn her deeper trust. To get on her good side, you first have to share what you have. The ruler of the East, who can see through everything, is a merman. Mia knew that a merchant's greatest advantage was the ability to instantly understand a customer's needs. The gods wanted the earth to remain pure, without a trace of deceit, so the merfolk, who could walk on land and swim in the sea, were granted eyes that could see through anything. When a fallen mermaid abused her eyes, the gods bestowed a trident upon a merman to eliminate her. The gods gave a stern warning that if anyone were to abuse the gifted eyes, the gift would be taken away. As their representatives, the gods let the blonde merman who had punished that mermaid rule the East. It was said that the one who stopped Rachel from destroying the North was none other than the Mermaid Queen. Knowing her true identity would cause trouble, Eve knew it was bound to be exposed sooner or later. Ever since that conversation, the Southern chief had been in a terrible state for days. The chief suddenly remembered Hopper, saying he was intimate with his wife. Noel wanted to ask him if he acted strangely because he was getting hot and bothered. He thought of her obsessively, as if possessed, and wondered if Hopper was also still hearing that mysterious voice. It was all too much, so Noel decided to go for a walk to clear his head. He wanted to confirm once more that Hopper knew what to do if his powers suddenly went berserk. The servant, in fact, remembered everything. He could not forget his words. That evening, Eve also decided to take a walk in the garden, where she suddenly ran into Noel. They hadn't been face-to-face in a long time. They had barely seen each other since the day he had left. Still, the girl was happy to see him standing there, so she decided to ask how his day had been. She just wanted to spend a little more time with him. But it was getting late, so Noel suggested that if she had something to tell him, she should say it tomorrow. Eva fought back tears, trying to understand why he was always trying to keep his distance. The commander didn't even bother to meet her gaze, insisting it wasn't her fault. She angrily demanded he look at her when he spoke, which made Noel blush instantly. With just a touch, she could clearly feel his body was burning up. Eva was shocked that he had such a high fever and hadn't called for her. His whole body was burning, and a single touch wasn't enough. First, she apologized. The more she touched him, the stronger her magic grew. She told the commander to hold still until the heat subsided. Their scorching gazes met for the first time in a long while, completely captivated by one another. Eva's soft, fair skin, her delicate features, sweet lips, and beautiful eyes. Noel was mesmerized. His head was spinning, and he couldn't think straight. The night was late, and the commander told her to go back to her room. She secretly wished he would kiss her. Noel just couldn't bring himself to do it, but in that moment, she wished he would. His face, his ears, his hands, everywhere she had touched was burning hot. It was like being scorched. Thinking back, Eva wondered if she had ever felt anything like this before. Every time she touched him, her ice magic would instantly extinguish the heat. All of this made the girl feel that her own period of rampaging power was approaching. She clearly remembered that in the original story, Noel's power awakened on the day of Rachel's succession ceremony. It was entirely possible that things had accelerated because of Eva. but she was just a supporting character. When Noel found his mate, she would have to leave and disappear from the memories of everyone here. By trying to stay by his side, she was no longer a background character in this story. Zion saw his sister in the hall and told her to go to bed, but she was getting ready to go out. She was planning to go to the east because she needed to ask a question of the merfolk who lived there. Zion knew it was dangerous and didn't understand why she had to leave. He wanted to go too. Eva reassured him that she would be back soon, when suddenly someone said he should come along as well. Mia said she didn't know how long the journey would take, so your brother would have to stay here alone. Seeing the strange newcomer, Eva called Zion over, as if she hadn't been with him all day. It turned out this was the furball who had been hanging around the mansion for a while. The only cat in the world who could take us both to the east. We have a client who is curious about Eva's story, and it's a merchant's job to keep their customers happy. Mia hoped we would think of her as a means of transportation. It would be even better if we could cover the fee. Just as Eva thought, even if this one couldn't be trusted, it was better than traveling alone. The cat girl felt the matter was urgent, but from the wolf girl's expression, it didn't seem to be the case. It was true that Eve was in no position to question the method right now. Since they would be traveling together for a while, she felt she needed to know what to call the lady. The girl introduced herself as Mia Thun and told her to just call her Mia. She never wanted to be a follower, so she hoped she wouldn't have a negative effect on Noel. But if that were to happen, she would have to leave him. That night, Rachel had another nightmare and woke up crying, begging for it all to finally stop. The girl felt she had had enough. She didn't want to be alone, so she decided to wake up her sister and brother, but the rooms were empty. The next morning, when they discovered Eva and Zion were missing, the whole mansion was in an uproar. Julia was blamed for not staying by Eva's side and was thereafter unfit to call herself her exclusive maid. She felt guilty and was ready to accept any punishment, as she should have been with her mistress. Noel also blamed himself for the girl's disappearance, thinking his greed was the cause. His impulsive actions hadn't even given Eve a chance to breathe. The moment he lost control, she was clearly terrified and just wanted to get out of there. Now the commander realized he should have waited for her to say everything. But he had messed up. Seeing her brother completely lose it, Rachel decided to step up and release the Fire Phoenix. She didn't hesitate to order the Firebird to find the owner of the ring. Perhaps because it was a port city, the sun in the east was scorching. But when the heroine looked down, she couldn't see a single damn drop of water. Thinking Mia was a fraud, she laid into her. Mia didn't want to hear any excuses, but what she was desperately trying to explain was that the ocean was currently closed. The Mermaid Queen has had the castle gates locked for years, so you can't get in legally. Mia said the West was a huge market, mainly because people get their information from where there are a lot of people. And commerce in the West is much more developed than anywhere else, with a lot of intelligence circulating there. Her contact, in particular, was a big information broker who knew exactly how to get into the Mermaid Castle. Our girls decided to trust her one last time, so they went to see Mia's colleague, Sheba. First, Eva explained that she was here to go to the east to see the merfolk. This cat letter said that Sheba knew the way there, even knowing that the Mermaid Castle doesn't receive outsiders. She had to go. Since she was a friend of Mia's, Sheba didn't ask any more questions. It turned out that merfolk have a weakness for beautiful things, especially expensive jewelry. There are different factions among the merfolk, and as long as you have something valuable, someone will give you a tip. The guy said that finding a gem that a mermaid would truly like would be a huge hassle. Ava only had cash on her right now, so she wanted to go to a jewelry store as soon as possible. With the money she brought, she managed to look at all the magic crystals in the store. Mia wondered if the merfolk would like these, but figured as long as they were pretty, it would be fine. Just as Eva was buying out the entire store, a strange-looking man walked in. He wanted to buy magic crystals of any kind and asked the clerk to show him all the stock. But he was very frustrated when he found out another customer had already bought all the magic crystals. It sounded urgent, as he needed at least one right now. On second thought, Eva didn't really need the magic crystals. She just needed gemstones. She was going to buy them because they were pretty, but she decided to let the man have them instead. The boy was overjoyed to hear this and said he would never forget this kindness. Still, they had to get going, but Mia thought they should take a few crystals just in case. The man turned to the owner and told him to wrap up all the magic crystals. Strangely, everyone reacted to his face, both the girl and her spirit. Eve wanted to repay the man for taking care of Zion, and as thanks, they now had to head to the east. But Zion begged to stay here a little longer. It turned out the shop owner had told him there was a lot of water where his sister was going, which was a given, since that's where the merfolk live. So the little guy was afraid of water, and he had been following his sister, only because he was worried about her. Though it was a bit late to say, Sheba felt it would have been better if the kid hadn't come along. Merfolk love pure souls, and Zion's pure, untainted soul made him a prime target. If a mermaid sets her sights on something, she'll stop at nothing to get it. Since the kid was now unattended, Sheba offered to look after him. Hearing this, Eve wished she had shown up earlier so she wouldn't cause him more trouble. When they were alone, Zion said the dirt flowed like water. He was the first kid who didn't cry upon seeing Sheba's face. The boy had never seen sand before, and everything was new and seemed magical to him. What shocked him most was the huge river, the hot wind, and Sheba's crazy eye color. Zion's eyes were blue, but Sheba's had a whole rainbow in them, a mix of purple, blue, and yellow. Sheba's eyes looked like a jewel to him, and it was the first time someone had looked directly into his eyes. Mia said her friend was always a bit emotional, but he was trustworthy. Zion was thrilled when he heard his sister agreed to leave him here and would be back soon. Seeing the joy in his eyes, he still couldn't believe he was that afraid of water. It was time to go, so she entrusted her brother to Sheba's care and promised to be back soon. After the girls packed their things, Eve noticed Mia was chowing down on something. It was a reincarnation instinct, a new product they were developing. She wasn't an addict or anything. The stuff just helped her get a lot of things done in that form. Mia even gave Eve some herbs for beastmen and told her not to say she didn't have any friends. It was time to hit the road. The cat girl hurried off to the merfolk, trying to figure out why Eve had no friends. Zion had been wondering lately why their cafe was called Bad Cat. The kid thought Sheba was kind, though that wasn't the owner's intention. The crazy thing was that Zion could read. He knew the letters of the human world. Sheba only hung that sign because he liked the way it looked, nothing more. Not many beastmen knew human letters, so the guy used it as a code. What's more, in the human world, writing wasn't exclusive to the upper class. Just as the beast man decided to ask the kid for his family name, there was a bang and a fierce wind blew. A huge hurricane kicked up, tearing everything apart, and the kid had a chance to grab a hand. Rachel, brave as ever, appeared out of nowhere, grabbing her brother's hand tightly and pulling him over. She fought back her own frantic pain and just wanted to know what Zion was doing here. The girl was angry that her younger siblings had run off here without a word. She squeezed Zion's hand so tightly it sent a sharp pain through him. She was furious when she found out Eve had gone to the human world in the east. The scared little guy didn't want to go find his sister. He was scared to death of the water. If that was all, Rachel was prepared to use her will to evaporate that ocean until not a drop was left. In that case, Zion just needed to follow her closely. As he decided to head for the east, Sheba reminded him that his sister had promised to look after him. He was convinced that place was no place for a child. He wanted to ask the girl to stay too, but he had no idea she was a damn red dragon. A member of a race known for its proud spirit was bowing his head. Thinking of that brat Mia, Sheba couldn't figure out what kind of lunatics he was working with. The commander of the South finally met the guy who had been ignoring all his letters. Now, the guy who couldn't even be bothered to grant him a meeting suddenly wanted to see Noel. And guess what? He didn't even show up himself, just sent his right-hand man. His Majesty was busy with official duties, but Noel was convinced this was a top priority. There was no time to argue, so he figured he'd just find out what that pretty boy was thinking. According to the messenger, the documents sent by the Southern commander had been reviewed, but His Majesty said he could not accept them. To be honest, it sounded like a cheap shot, though it was probably true. Don't bother verifying it, and hopefully that's the end of it. The only thing Noel found funny was that His Majesty never changed his mind. He told the messenger to tell him that he wouldn't budge on his end either. It was a complete waste of time for Commander Ramirez to come to this meeting, but honestly, it was for the best. If His Majesty was that foolish, it was better he didn't even know of her existence. It would only hurt her. The first thing on his mind was Eve, who deserved to hear the 3 words, "I am sorry." Noel needed to apologize for scaring her and beg her to stay by his side. He was a good person. Maybe she would come back. When she returned, the commander would give her only what she liked, make it so she would never feel sad here, and keep her here for many, many years. But the dark side of Noel wanted to devour her and make her his for all eternity. Upon arriving at the East Coast, Eve was met with an extremely hostile attitude. It seemed the ocean was now off limits to outsiders, by order of the chief. Another clueless woman showed up and was told to give up while she was ahead. After all this, she was about to break down. At this rate, they weren't going to get anywhere. Not knowing how much time was left, Eva wanted to find a way to stop Noel's power from going berserk as soon as possible. As she was thinking, she suddenly noticed a cat landing beside her. The Wanderer, having changed back to his human form, guessed she was here to see Lady Lan. From Eva's expression, she had never heard the name. She was just another fool who came running after hearing a stupid rumor. Seriously, if she had known the situation, she wouldn't have caused such a commotion up front. The stranger warned her that Lady Lan was not someone you could meet just because you wanted to. It seemed this girl wanted some heavy-duty answers, judging by how she was all geared up. Besides, the guy had never seen a beast man treated like a house pet. Whoever this girl was, she needed to know that everyone was equal before Lady Lan. Mia had a bad feeling and suggested they not follow him. Perhaps he could find the answer she was looking for, so she suggested they tail him instead. The entrance to the other world was by a river deep in the woods, and they stopped on the bank. First, the hero needed to drink the water of purification. She could only enter the sea after she had purified her body and mind. Though she was worried about not knowing the liquid's source, she had no time to hesitate. After drinking the nasty water, the girl did well, and now it was finally time to meet Lady Lan. Eve couldn't breathe underwater and thought she was going to die, but the stranger reassured her. For her, having been purified, the sea had opened its arms to her. It was then she understood that she was a mermaid. The hero gained the ability to feel the power of the purification water and could slowly begin to breathe. That adaptogen we drank earlier, it turns out it also lets you breathe underwater. It was time to go to Lady Lan's mansion, so the mermaid told us to follow her. It was a completely different world, full of sea creatures and underwater plants. It was so unreal. Lady Lan's mansion looked more like a temple than a regular house, at least at first glance. Inside, Miss Charlie announced that 2 companions had come to listen to Lady Lan's teachings. The sermon was about to begin, so Eve was invited into the main hall. It was so quiet it left her speechless, and it felt like they weren't even underwater. When he finally reached the main hall, she could walk right in and take a seat wherever she liked. It was then that she felt this was like a religious organization. But the craziest thing happened when Lady Lan finally appeared. Everyone dreamed of catching her attention, but the heroine found it all very strange. There she was, the beautiful, red-haired Lady Lan, greeting her followers. But there was a child in the crowd she had never seen before. It would be difficult to leave here now. Not knowing why everyone was so fanatically praising this Lan, Eva shyly greeted her. She pretended to be a believer, saying she had come all the way from the north, just to see Lady Lan. Now seeing her in person, the girl realized no words could truly capture her beauty. The lady felt there was no way this girl came just to admire her looks. She was curious what this lady wanted so badly that she had a lie to put up a front. Apparently, Eva was here because of Henry. People enchanted by that child always wander here. But the lady didn't expect that she had absolutely no idea who he was. It seems that while we investigate, she has agreed to hear the Wolf Lady's story. Meanwhile, the young master was being scolded by his father for thinking he had enough jewels. His father said he still didn't understand that the future of the East depended on his power. The old man ordered him to leave this place and gather all the magic crystals, even if he had to turn the world upside down. His father's body was growing weaker by the day, so the young man had to collect those magic crystals as soon as possible. If it weren't for the girl he recently met who went easy on him, he would have gotten more than just a scolding. What's more, it had been a long time since the young master had met a girl who wasn't instantly captivated by his looks. But after meeting that girl, it happened for the first time. A talking cat appeared out of nowhere and latched onto him, urging him to hurry. It turned out that some land dwellers had somehow slipped into their territory in the sea. The cat girl was frantic, saying they had met in the west, and her friend had been captured by a group of fanatics. Luckily for her, this little cat managed to escape, but her belongings were stolen, and now she was helpless. Hearing them call the man, young master, she guessed he must be very powerful. Only by figuring out how the land dwellers got into this mess could the young man come up with a solution. It seemed this cat had escaped from Serene Manor. Although it was one less problem, It was also tricky for the young master to go rescue the girl now, because walking in empty-handed was basically a suicide mission. And if he brought soldiers, it would likely trigger an all-out firefight. The future chief hadn't seen the current chief in a long time. They had never met. There was someone he had to find at all costs, so Noel Ramirez pleaded for his cooperation. After some time, Eve finally woke up to find her hands and feet bound. Ms. Land began bombarding her with questions, which was rather ironic coming from the person who had knocked her out. The wolf girl, who had been chattering away before, was now as quiet as a fish. Arya really hated silence. She decided to introduce herself first, saying she was Arya, and that she didn't usually reveal her real name. The boy behind her was Charles. Unfortunately, the knots were impossible to untie. Arya had gone to great lengths to tie her up. Eve didn't understand why she was tied up, so she didn't waste her energy struggling. As for the gems, Arya hadn't touched them. She wasn't so despicable as to just take them. Besides, it wasn't mind reading. She could just hear and see others' thoughts. And with Eve, all her thoughts were written on her face. Figuring out her purpose directly would be too boring, so Arya decided to give her a little advice by asking questions. Knowing her personality, the heroine remained silent even when given a chance. Well, Arya had wanted to be friendly, but it seemed she would have to forcibly read her memories. She apologized for being direct, then placed her hand on the girl's head to read her memories. She finally understood what Eve's life was like, and she definitely didn't find it boring. But upon seeing something strange, the lady yanked her hand back and was thrown aside. She couldn't figure out what the half-naked girl was sitting on, nor why she said to call her Your Majesty. And what on earth was she doing with her legs, whether she liked or hated that man? Eve had too many indecent images in her mind, but Arya didn't want to provoke her any further now. Wondering where the girl had learned all this, the lady ordered her to answer immediately. Eve couldn't believe this mermaid wanted to kill her and was accusing her of being scary. She hadn't figured out how to stop the plot from going off track. She had left Rachel behind, and Zion was still in the West. If the heroine had known this would be her fate, she would have tried harder to get close to Noel. These wild images were an eye-opener for Arya, as if from another dimension. She had read countless minds, but had never seen anything like this. It seemed they had similar tastes, like two frogs in a well. The lady almost went her whole life without knowing such things existed. If the situation weren't so chaotic, they could have talked about role-playing all night. Still, if she tried to please Arya, maybe Eve could regain her freedom. Recalling what she had just seen, the lady felt it was a blessing to be a siren. It's a fallen type of mermaid who uses her powers to bewitch people and make them jump into the sea. Arya was sure the girl only knew some ancient legends found in books. Even if she used her power a little, she felt it wouldn't harm anyone. Even if the truth came out, there would be no punishment, only something interesting would happen. Since the wolf girl had shared such valuable information, Arya decided to also tell her family's story about the red-haired siren. After the mermen and mermaids won the conflict, the sirens were forced to hide among them. The red-haired siren wasn't even liked by her own kind, because legend said she had tried to kill the first chief. Because of this legend, everyone believed it, and they could only live with their heads down. Arya's mother believed she was a sinner until her death, and told her daughter to spend her life atoning. Even if the girl felt frustrated, there was nothing she could do. Their family could only live that way. So in the end, all her mother got was a lonely death. Arya hated that way of life, so she decided to make some money first. People said sirens played with souls and controlled minds, but she had no intention of getting involved in that boring nonsense, as she knew souls couldn't be exchanged for money. After being caught by a fisherman's hook, Arya told him that his heart was filled with sorrow. He acted as if nothing was wrong, but inside he was rotting and collapsing, his wounds tormenting him. The siren didn't want to harm the fisherman. She just wanted to soothe the sorrow in his heart. She knew what it felt like to forget reality. Gazing at the shore, despite being a siren, she let the fisherman go and told him to be careful by the water. But he couldn't let her go. The man didn't understand why she hadn't heard his prayers at all, but instead made him see himself clearly. It seemed he was praying to a god for answers, but that great god remained silent. But Arya, she could give him the words he needed. The fisherman hoped for a response, but got none, so he felt he should call the siren a goddess. After that, it was simple. People who heard the rumors flocked to Arya for advice, willing to give anything in return. All she had to do was read their memories and show a little sympathy. Just like that, the number of followers exploded and money piled up. Within a worthless soul something of great value is hidden. Obtain it, and you can have everything. This is why the lady never complained about being born a siren. Honest mermaids could only dream of such a life. Since they couldn't see that kind of story, Eve declared she could tell other stories because usually newcomers to these things have a ton of questions. But the siren didn't need that. She preferred to dive into her mind and see for herself rather than listen. According to her, it would be like a normal dream, but the mistress couldn't know when the girl would wake up. The heroine desperately hoped to see Noel one last time before they parted. Unexpectedly, the sea was unusually rough today, churning with some mysterious power. Seeing this, the man immediately told his son to go home, even though they hadn't caught a single fish. Everyone knew the sea was the siren's way of expressing their emotions. No one knew what was happening, but something big was definitely going on in the sea. An army descended upon the underwater world, demanding the arrogant sirens surrender immediately. His Highness guessed that the captain's companion might have entered the sea and been captured by the sirens. He brought as many soldiers as he could, but the siren community was closed off, and their combat strength was formidable. Noel believed the only way to deal with a deeply entrenched enemy was to leave them with nowhere to hide. The Southern captain's all-consuming power could even devour the sea itself. It was the power of the Red Dragon. Even such a powerful and brutal creature had a mate. Assuming the future chief wanted him gone, Noel pointed out that he wasn't focused on sealing off the ocean. The young master's father opposed the Red Dragon's reincarnation, succeeding as chief. Just as he had burned his own parents alive, he might dry up the entire Eastern Sea without a single drop left. Despite this, the Red Dragon still became the chief, and the master cut off contact with all regions. It said the first Red Dragon ruled the world with love, not force, but his reincarnation was feared. After seeing her in person, the young master seemed to start understanding his father. That power was about to erupt, and when it was released in an uncontrollable torrent, all living things would be destroyed. So if this was why the Southern chief was forbidden from entering the East, it was no wonder the future chief didn't want to stay here. He could understand why Noel was like this, even with his girl right here. He also found it strange why the Red Dragon's soul color was so chaotic. According to the attendant, the girl was put in prison, and then they moved her elsewhere. Then the ground began to shake, and everything collapsed. Everyone thought the Southern captain had blown something up, but the wave of energy actually came from a mermaid's power. As if zapped by that wave, the butler suddenly clutched his head and fainted. When she woke up, Eve was completely lost, but the truth was there was another soul in the butler's body. Meanwhile, with just one look at her reflection, the lady couldn't believe she was seeing Charlie. Realizing it wasn't her body, Arya understood their souls had swapped. The young master suddenly ordered everyone to capture all the sirens on sight. Just as Arya was trying to enter the child's body, she collided with a wave of mermaid power. All the souls got mixed up, the explosion messed with her head, and she couldn't hear anyone's thoughts. In the chaos, a crying child frantically searched for Ruby among the gloomy crowd. Despite the extreme danger, he had come to find his sister. He had entered the sea with Ruby, but was suddenly swept into a huge whirlpool and got separated. Thinking of how Ruby had promised to protect him, the little one broke down and cried. Arya couldn't bear to watch, and offered to help him find Ruby and take him to safety. She was a little injured, but promised to find out the girl's whereabouts after she recovered. Just then, a trident whistled past, and she barely managed to shield the child. Renee, the commander of the mermaid army, told the siren to stay away from the child and surrender obediently. He had never seen such a foolish person. In his eyes, sirens were a disgrace to merfolk. The girl couldn't believe he had the nerve to act so high and mighty, especially since he was the one who started the fight. People like him always treated the quiet ones who minded their own business as sinners. As if possessed, she decided this time to go along with his wishes and become the siren he imagined. Suddenly, a strange energy enveloped the battlefield, and a girl appeared, her face hidden by a red hood. Arya recognized who she was without using her powers. It was the form of the Red Dragon. The wild girl ordered them to let Zine go. It seemed they had no idea who they had provoked, so Ruby was ready to make them pay. But seeing little Zion's confused face, the anger in her heart instantly subsided. The girl held out her hand, saying they had to find her little sister as soon as possible. Ruby noticed Zion was scared. She had unintentionally released her power again. Although she knew it would scare him, she worried her brother would be afraid of her, but the child thought she was incredibly cool. Rachel felt terrible at that moment. She didn't want him to look at her because she thought her face was ugly. But Zion thought she was the most beautiful person in the world. Ruby always protected him with her amazing magic. When he was cold, she would hold his hands to warm him up. Although he was taught not to comment on people's appearances, he wanted to say that Ruby would always be the most charming-looking one. Thinking such words were only for someone you like, the girl fled in a panic. Just then, Arya decided to seize the opportunity to take back her own body, but she was tricked again and ended up back in the body of the locked-up child. Thinking about her situation, the young lady just wanted to find her own body as soon as possible. Just then, a man's voice rang out, and the Southern captain burst into the cell, his face streaked with tears. Meanwhile, seeing Mia in the cat's body, the butler thought she had been captured again. The cat thought the old man was crazy, scratched him, and darted out of his arms. It was only then that Eve, in the butler's body, realized this wasn't her own body. Because of her unique soul, the young master recognized her as the one he had met in the West. This girl was the friend the cat was looking for. His soul resonated with the child who had been with her all along. Suddenly, another explosion shook the place. The Southern Chief's power was steadily growing. According to the young master, Noel had come for his mate, but now was not the time to talk about it. It was hard to believe the Southern Chief would lose control of his power like this. Eve realized that if they were swept up in the torrent of mana, it would all be over. She was determined to intervene, but the future chief told her it was too dangerous. In fact, the one in danger now was Noel, so Eve had no intention of staying here. Before leaving, she told the Lord to grab Mia and wait outside. It was then that he had a revelation. The one whose soul was connected to the Southern Chief was that girl. The two souls were drawn to each other. Seeing the imposing dragon chief and hearing he wanted to talk, Arya couldn't figure out why he was here. He just wanted to explain. If she would just give him a chance. He apologized for scaring her earlier, saying he was just too impatient. To keep Eve from leaving him, he promised never to do anything she didn't like again. At that moment, memories of the red dragon flashed chaotically before Arya's eyes. She knew the Southern Lord had a mate, but she never imagined it would be the owner of this body. The way he looked at her was like he was about to devour a delicious meal. No matter what happened, Arya decided to run to escape the clutches of this monster. Eve's lifeless body fell into the dragon's arms, and Noel, terrified, didn't know what had happened. He was worried about her and had to know if she was hurt or in any pain. Feeling that beastly warmth, the girl opened her eyes and realized she was in Noel's arms. Arya had actually touched the dragon's mate. Heaven knows if she understood the full situation. Thinking that no one could withstand that kind of desire, she suddenly felt someone grab her. From Henry's face, it was clear something had just happened, and they needed to get out of there quickly. Eve was sure she was running in another body, only hoping to get back to her own first. She checked on Noel first, and felt his body temperature finally stabilize. The captain explained his forward behavior, worried she would get hurt when she fell. When he said his request was too much, she had no idea what he was talking about. But Noel didn't mind. Even if it was just for a little while, he wanted Eve to stay a bit longer. To be honest, it wasn't a burden for her at all. On the contrary, Eve had come here to help him, but ended up making everyone worry. Her magic couldn't lower the dragon's heat, so she wanted to find another way. She left without a word, thinking it wouldn't take long. If she were a true mate, solving this problem would be effortless. But for Noel, things weren't that simple. The high fever often struck when he had trouble controlling his emotions. The Southern Chief was just projecting his own insecurities, so he would never do something like that to the person he loved. Then Eve mentioned she wanted to ask the mermaids what the connection was between them. Realizing she had misspoken, Eve knew she had to reveal her true identity to explain. Noel just needed to know if this was really all she wanted. There had never been a girl who was afraid of him. Noel didn't care who she was, as long as she was by his side. Looking into his eyes, Eve thought that maybe it was okay to tell him the truth now. Despite the wolf's blood in her veins, she was sure when facing him. Seeing the rock slip, she barely jumped in time to avoid being crushed. They first scrambled to escape the building, which looked like it could collapse at any moment. The captain apologized for being a bit reckless, then swept the girl into his arms. To get out of there quickly, Eve snuggled closer, wishing with all her heart that she could truly be Noel's mate. She might be stunningly beautiful, but our girl just wanted to be by the captain's side a little longer. They managed to escape the disaster area and reach safety. Suddenly, a child's scream pierced the air, and a terrified Ruby rushed to her little sister. Both Ruby and Zion were extremely worried about what had happened to their sibling. So Noel decided to find out how the child got here when he had told her to wait in the south. It turned out that when she and Zion suddenly disappeared, Rachel completely panicked. The main thing was Eve understood how she felt and apologized. She thought no one had even noticed her. Because no one had ever looked for him before, Eve felt that even if she kept quiet, everything would be fine. Everyone in the castle was terrified because the girl had vanished without a word, and they were worried sick. The heroine really didn't want to reveal her true identity because she was afraid of being abandoned. We still have a big question to answer, which is who is kidnapping the sirens. Scared out of her wits, Charlie confessed that she did it. She was the one who lured the girl into the sea and pleaded for them to spare Ms. Lan. Another mermaid admitted he had been rude to her, while Ms. Lan was just asking questions. The other mermaid was actually the one calling the shots in the mansion. Everyone took responsibility for what happened, just to protect the completely innocent Ms. Lan. Sirens were a selfish race with no family ties, but what Eve saw was a different picture. Ms. Lan's appearance put an end to everything, but she was the one who started it all. The young master promised, deciding to arrest only that girl, and everyone else could leave. Henry, representing the Easterners, took responsibility and apologized for the disrespect shown to their guests. Now he could finally introduce himself properly. His name was Henry, the future chief of the East. But in the novel, the next chief of the East was a girl with red eyes. One day, a beautiful mermaid visited her, having heard that the chief had brought a wolf from the north. She was the ruler of this land, the Red Dragon, but the mermaid couldn't stand by and let a massacre happen. When asked to let go of her grudge and stop the senseless killing, the chief just laughed. She decided it would be worth it to dye the sea the same blood red as the mermaid's hair. A crimson ocean, now that would be a good show. Zion guessed his sister would give those guys a piece of her mind, so he chimed in that the girl was cool. She helped him, even saved him from some bad guys, and was about to look for Eve, so she shouldn't be punished at all. But Henry argued they shouldn't trust what a child says after meeting a siren. Perhaps his mind had been muddled. Hearing this, Charlie swore she hadn't brainwashed anyone and reminded him that the chief could tell if she had. She got a slap for that. The butler thought she was trying to make her crime worse. The guy was absolutely furious, as if she had committed a grave sin just by talking back to the young master. Watching them argue over the siren, Eve suddenly realized there was a very serious problem here. Sirens were evil mermaids, always craving pure souls and all things beautiful. But she had shown no interest in Zion or any of the jewels. Maybe Eve was just overthinking it, but her submissive demeanor made her uneasy. After some thought, she suggested postponing the punishment for a while, but she found it wouldn't work. The sirens had been harassing the East for too long. They had been flexing their military power, building an army without permission, and constantly letting outsiders into our waters. Hearing all this, Eve decided she had to find out if these two knew the losses she had suffered because of it. Despite Henry's grumbling, he agreed to take her to the interrogation room and bring Arya there. He wasn't worried the siren would take the chance to escape. He felt she had caused him enough trouble for long enough. The only hope now was that Eve wouldn't make Henry regret his decision. They arrived shortly, not knowing what tricks the siren might pull. Although the butler had taken all sorts of precautions and asked for the girl to be watched, she felt it was a bit of an overreaction. She didn't believe Arya would harm her. Fearless of the danger, Eva hoped that enough guards from the east would come to her aid. Upon entering the cold cell, she heard the siren's confession as Arya blamed herself for messing everything up. She dared not beg for forgiveness for luring people to their doom for money and was ready to accept her punishment. If it weren't for those who succumbed to greed, Arya would have long been dead. With hair like hers, she had no other choice. If she had chosen another path, no one would have tolerated her. Arya did it just to survive, like all the abandoned creatures outside. She didn't expect the she-wolf to believe her, as she knew there was no way to prove it. Arya said she had no power to bewitch people and insisted that lonely creatures often just deceive themselves. Since Arya had said that revealing the truth would not be punished, Eva didn't understand what she was trying to say. It turned out that even if Arya chose to expose the lie, she would not lose her fortune. It was then that I realized that if everyone knew Eve was a wolf, she wouldn't be punished at all. She didn't care about internal conflicts and wouldn't help those who were a threat to her. Even after all that had happened, she was still thinking about what had occurred. After talking with Arya, Eve met Noel, who was worried about her condition. She calmed him down, telling him she had only asked the demi-human a few questions. Noel was desperate to know what they talked about, but it would be a hassle to explain. But he would find out soon enough, so she told him to be patient. The captain had no objection, as he trusted this remarkable girl from the north. To be honest, thanks to Henry, the interrogation went smoothly. He let her voice her findings, which would be a great help to the investigation. What he didn't know was that Eve was planning to request an audience with the Eastern Chief. Even with urgent matters, Father Henry was not accepting any meeting requests at the moment. It seemed the future chief didn't understand that disrespecting the Southern Chiefs, mate was also disrespecting himself. At this point, Noel began to wonder if his future Eastern Chief didn't even understand basic hierarchy and etiquette. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the young master finally understood and asked them to follow him. Suddenly, Noel warned the girl to be careful. He felt a strange and suspicious energy permeating the castle. The Eastern Chief was unwell, so Henry asked for everyone's understanding and consideration. After knocking, Henry announced his name, but strangely, he began to tremble when he heard his father's voice. The Eastern Chief was happy to see his son, saying he always suffered because of this useless old man. Looking at the lady behind him, the old man thought his son had brought back a rather fine piece of beauty. The Eastern Chief hadn't seen the Southern Chief in a long time. He had cut off the sea routes as soon as he ascended the throne. Moreover, he seemed completely unaware that Noel Ramirez had not come alone. According to Henry, something major had happened in the Siren's territory today. The situation was urgent, so he dealt with it on the spot. As soon as the chief heard that his son had dared to go there, his friendly face instantly turned to silent fury. He had told him countless times that the Siren's territory was absolutely forbidden. With such a worthless heir, the old man couldn't possibly hand over power to him. Seeing the old man raise his hand to Henry, Eve got angry and decided to intervene. This was strange for the commander's mate, as the chief had never received a report about the Southern Chief having a mate. When the chief suddenly apologized for his own ignorance and his incompetent subordinates, Eve was almost speechless. Better late than never. It was time for an introduction. I am Mentor Durrell, the Eastern Chief. Henry said that the red-haired siren had caused great harm to the Southern Chief's mate. Although the siren was responsible, it all happened in the Eastern Territory. Strangely, at the mention of the word mate, Mentora radiated intense hostility. Suddenly noticing the shadow on Eve's face, Noel wondered if everything was all right. And that was how the Eastern Chief learned her name was Eve. It was awkward that he was only finding out now. Mentora apologized to her on behalf of the East and was prepared to pay compensation or take action. When he offered to make amends, Noel agreed to whatever decision Eve made. The girl accepted the invitation. The more she studied the East, the stranger it seemed. There was a legend here that red-haired sirens were cursed, but for some reason, the Eastern Chief himself had red hair. The merman sitting opposite her couldn't read her mind, and all Eve could see was a blur. Since the East had distinguished guests this time, Mentora hoped his precious son wouldn't mess things up. Only when he was alone could the Eastern Chief finally laugh out loud. He was finally free. There is a guide, passed down only to the members of our family. It says to be wary of the dragon with a single heart. After the dragon dies, the world will return to normal. Who would have thought the prophecy would be fulfilled in this generation? But if the dragon has a mate, the chief needs to be even more careful. In Mentor's eyes, Noel was just a fool who couldn't even find the mate destined for him. Now there was only one path left for him, to become a victim of his own power and die. So the sudden appearance of a red dragon was actually a good thing for the Eastern Chief. After all, new legends always overshadow the old ones. After swallowing the gem, the chief was sure it was going to be a grand party. He was determined to prove once and for all who the true ruler of the seas was. Meanwhile, all Henry could think about was why she kept causing trouble. Arya was just making things more difficult. She should have waited a little longer. but she could no longer bear to live like a walking corpse. It had been 12 years, and she was still waiting, holding on to the young master's words. Nothing had changed since then. The sirens were still treated like dirt, forced to live this way. In fact, Henry was so tightly controlled by his father that he didn't even have the freedom to act. Arya found him ridiculous for thinking he could escape his father's shadow by becoming chief. She didn't need a single thing the young master had done for her. Now Arya declared that they would live on the very land where he had imprisoned them, living as true sirens. She was beyond help, refusing to listen to anyone but Henry. Somehow, when he first saw land as a child, he decided to get some practical training for his succession. His teachers were idiots, always giving him assignments, saying a chief needed to understand how people live. But the young master was destined to rule the endless seas, so he decided to go get experience now. It was then that the red-haired girl in the cave took an interest in his experience and training. The ninth-generation Henry Durrell, possessing stunning beauty, thought she surely couldn't resist his charms. The Durrell family was famous for their stunning looks, which naturally attracted people of all races, and Henry was no exception. The red-haired girl was the first to crush his confidence, saying he wasn't her type. The young master couldn't believe that her heart didn't flutter even a little when she looked at him. To make sure, Henry had the girl look at his face again, but even then, she told him to get lost. That was their first meeting on land. It was later revealed that Henry was there to study human life. He cleverly framed skipping class as a noble deed, though he didn't see it that way himself. Listening to people's hearts was just a basic human responsibility, so the boy decided to grant the wish of the first person he met. Just then, the red-haired girl suggested they could hang out sometimes. She said it didn't have to be often. She just wanted a friend. In fact, that was a bit difficult, as Henry wanted to see his companion every day. And so they became friends, and the girl told him to call her Arya. After becoming friends, Henry would pretend to study and wander around. They helped elderly fishermen with their catch and made shell necklaces to give to the children. They spent all their time together, and that time was incredibly precious to the young master. But if he could turn back time, he would never have called her a friend, because then he wouldn't have fallen in love. Then one day, Henry was in a hurry to see his friend and decided to skip class again. When word got out that he was studying human life with someone, the teacher said that no one was attending those classes anyway. Nevertheless, the boy was very excited that someone could teach him so much, so he begged for the lesson to be postponed, even for just a little while. Henry's eyes sparkled as he swore that even the butler would be shocked to hear it, that she had lilac eyes that sparkled like precious gems and cheeks that were always slightly flushed. Her hair was like silk woven from the evening glow, a brilliant red. Hearing this, the young master apologized and decided to find out which race she belonged to. One time, Henry decided to walk the girl home, but she insisted the path was long and a bit rough. The sun was about to set, so he suggested they hurry. Scared, Arya pushed him away and immediately realized she had made the boy fall into the water. It turned out he was fine. He could breathe underwater, so he didn't care at all. He just felt he had been too forceful in his actions, so he backed off. The young master decided to leave first and told the girl to be careful on her way back. To be honest, he had never really thought about what race she was, only that she lived in a nearby village. But Henry had never imagined she could be a siren. He thought that if she were a siren, she would have known who he was and tried to lure him from the start. The boy flatly refused to believe she would do it on purpose. He was convinced that Arya wouldn't deliberately play with his feelings like that. After a moment of thought, the future head of the family decided to bring the butler with him today. He planned to go to the nameless cemetery to pray for the deceased. If Henry couldn't see the truth himself, this was his only chance to find out what was in her heart. Nevertheless, the young master was sure that saying too much would get him into trouble. He promised to accompany the boy today, but he couldn't stay for long. Soon, after arriving at the nameless cemetery, Arya called out to God, hoping he would hear her prayer. She pleaded for God to grant eternal life to those in heaven and for them to find peace in a place where they could forget the pain of death. The girl prayed that the Almighty would grant this to her mother and give her the courage to live until she could see her again. That day, Henry brought someone to their meeting for the first time. His butler was with him. Seeing the girl, the butler was absolutely certain that she was the red-haired siren. Feeling Feeling it was his duty to protect the young master, the butler decided to get him out of there as soon as possible. But the young heir wanted to hear her side of the story, believing that Arya couldn't possibly be that siren. After that, his father ordered increased surveillance on the siren's territory, and Henry was placed under house arrest. The butler felt bad. All he had done was to protect the boy. Even if the girl was a siren, Henry still considered her a friend. So the story ends with him deciding to settle things with her soon. The boy decided to tell her a secret, that he had never been able to see the truth. That's why his old man was desperately trying to hold on to power for as long as possible, because his son lacked this ability. But Arya still thought the boy would be a great leader, as sometimes ruling is about balancing interests. Of course, the truth is important, but the truth alone is not enough to unite people. What's important is that Henry has the kindness to accept anyone and the eyes to see people's true nature. If he was worried about not being able to see the truth, he could appoint an advisor. After deciding to become a leader, Henry's first priority was to eliminate all forms of discrimination. In the history of the East, sirens were treated poorly, but he didn't believe they were evil from the start. The boy would judge based on what he saw with his own eyes. Even with power, it's difficult to do it alone, so he asked Arya to join him. She was the one who listened to his stories, who judged right from wrong, the one Henry truly needed. He only hoped that the red-haired siren would become his chief advisor. The whole thing devolved into the boy having to check every place they had been. He couldn't believe that everything Arya said was a lie. At the last place, his only hope was that she would come out and talk to him honestly. He found her in the cave, but from the look on her face, something terrible had happened. Henry just wanted to know why she was so badly hurt, but Arya pushed him away in a panic. She said that a cursed merman like her shouldn't touch the hands of a nobleman like him. In fact, the girl was indeed a pure-blooded, red-haired siren. The fact that she was a red-haired siren didn't matter to the future chief. He only wanted to know one thing. Was everything about her, their shared memories, just a trick to deceive him? When she said she had designs on the future chief, Henry couldn't believe his ears. There was a lot the boy didn't know about her, but he knew one thing. Arya was not the type to play with people's feelings. According to the merman, he couldn't be so sure, especially when he couldn't even see her true nature. It was then that it dawned on the young master. He decided to leave and send the girl back to the sea. As a farewell, he promised to convince his father to change the order for strict surveillance on the sirens. For the next few days, Henry was distant and barely ate. Considering he didn't have much time, he planned to catch up on all his missed lessons. The boy thought that since he was a flawed being who couldn't see the truth, he should at least study properly. The butler believed that the pain he was feeling now would help him become a compassionate leader. According to him, Henry could understand better than anyone the pain of lacking something others take for granted. This understanding could be used to become a ruler who could spot and comfort hidden sorrows. Back then on the beach, Arya thought it would be an honor to be his first advisor. After everything that had happened, the young heir wasn't sure if he was really capable of it. If he couldn't even earn the trust of one person, then it was no good. Soon, at the meeting with the southern chief in Zion, Eve looked absolutely stunning. Most of all, her charming appearance moved Noel. She was beautiful today. In any case, she should trust the captain. He would end this today. At the banquet, they heard some ridiculous rumors. No one expected to see a dragon with his mate. He felt like the other mermen were staring, but this guy's gaze was on a whole other level. The banquet was prepared in a hurry, but Mintra Durrell hoped they would enjoy it. The reason for tonight's banquet was that the southern chief's wife was harmed while visiting the east. So today, the chief would take this opportunity to punish the one who dared to disrespect them. They usually turned a blind eye to her antics, but now she had gone too far and harmed an outsider. To maintain peace, they could no longer ignore it. So Mintra wanted to execute Arya with his own hands. Hearing this, Henry had to intervene, reminding his father that the agreed punishment was exile. Since the chief's son was so soft-hearted, the master felt it was time for him to step in. The final decision was in Eve's hands, and everyone wanted to see if she could forgive Arya's insolence. It turned out she agreed, but it was a great mistake to use brainwashing to cover up the truth. As the victim, the girl decided to carry out the punishment herself with what the chief held in his hands. Everyone was shocked that she wanted to use the Trianon, something only the chief could wield. According to the butler, even if she was the southern chief's wife, her request was a bit much. Only the direct bloodline of the eastern chief could hold the Trianon. To bring peace to the east, the chief granted the girl that power. The The way he controlled the crowd was an eye-opener for her. This guy knew how to manipulate public opinion. Mintra could have said it was disrespectful and refused, but instead, he went along with her nonsensical request. Eve was acting crazy, completely out of common sense, while he played the part of a generous monarch, which meant that based on the image he'd built, she could push him to do things too. She decided she wanted to see how this guy would pay for the crime of using brainwashing to cover up the truth. When she said the cleansing was happening all over the East, she wasn't referring to Arya, but to the Eastern Chief. Seeing the chief in danger, the guards immediately took up their weapons to protect him. In an instant, the Red Dragon's all-consuming power swept through the hall. He was serious. If they dared to touch even the hem of the dragon's mate's skirt, they had better be prepared to face the consequences. Not knowing what she was doing, Mintra told him to lower his spear as it could negatively affect regional relations. The heroine didn't ask Chief Durrell anything. She could also call him by another name, like Siren. The aide couldn't stand the disrespect and ordered the southern captain to reprimand his mate. However, Noel had no intention of doing so. After all, dragons follow the will of their mates. Eve ordered him to restrain himself, or this place would have already been engulfed in flames. The Eastern Chief claimed that the woman Noel knew was the biggest liar here, and he pitted him for it. He said she was full of lies, claiming to be the dragon's mate. What Chief Durrell meant was that this woman couldn't possibly be the dragon's mate. He said this with the utmost certainty, with the eyes of a merman who possessed the gift of insight, just like the Eastern Chief. See, as a representative of God, the blonde merman who punished the proud merman was made the Eastern Chief. Every demi-human race knows that mermen can't help but speak the truth. If that's the case, Eva wondered how the Eastern Chief could claim he was telling the truth. She thought mermen were punished for the truth, yet Minora was fine, as if his truth didn't matter. Perhaps it was because he couldn't see the real truth at all, or, as our girl here implied, the whole legend was a lie from the start. As for the chief being able to see the truth, Mr. Henry could testify to that. When Eva first met his father, he completely mistook her for his son's chick. But Arya, she saw right through Eva and knew what she was from the very beginning. When Eva demanded to know what she was, the Eastern Chief grabbed her throat hard and pushed her back. He was choking her. Mintra was about to snap her neck. She couldn't just pass out. She had to find something to break free. Surprisingly, the mind control stopped working, and when the big boss tried to make up for everything, he almost got himself into big trouble. He noticed she kept tearing up and felt he'd been too rough before. Maybe the master had used her too much. This was bad news. Without it, the prey would slip away. He couldn't believe this woman was using the magic of the human king. At that decisive moment, Noel felt a pang of pity. He could no longer stand by and watch people threaten his beloved.